Are we good to go?
In about 2, 3. All right, you are now live.
Very good. Thank you so much, Randy. Welcome everybody back to the Board of Governors meeting this morning.
In about 2.
Are we good? I'm just hearing some noise. Okay. I'm sorry. Welcome again to the Board of Governors meeting this morning. For those in the public and the media watching via YouTube, we also welcome you. And for those of you on Zoom, again, a reminder to please have your lines on mute unless you want to speak to help minimize background noise. And board members, again, another reminder, if you would like to speak, please use the raise hand button that's inside the participants tab, which is probably on the bottom of your screen. Sharissa, will you please do a roll call of board members?
Yes, good morning. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay, great. Representative Tim Briggs.
Here.
Governor Audrey Bronson. Governor Nicole Dunlop.
Here.
Governor Alexander Feefolt.
Here.
Governor Donald Hauser.
Here.
Senator Scott Martin.
Here.
Vice Chair David Mazer.
Present.
Governor Mary Moskowitz.
Here.
Governor Thomas Mueller. I apologize.
Here. No problem, Teresa.
Secretary Noe Ortega.
Here, sorry.
It's all right. Representative Brad Roy.
Here.
Senator Judith Schwank. Designee Thomas Gumbar. Chair Cynthia Shapira is here. Vice Chair Sam Smith.
Here. Secretary
Meg Snead.
Here.
Governor Stephen Washington.
Here.
Governor Neil Weaver.
Here.
Governor Janet Yeomans.
Here.
And Dr. Jamie Phillips.
Here.
We have a quorum. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sharissa. I appreciate that. So this is a continuation of the board meeting from yesterday, and we will pick up from where we left off. I believe we're going to start with the last item that we did not get to last night, and that's our audit report. So let me see first if Vice Chair and Chair of the Audit Committee, Sam Smith, would you like to say a few words before we introduce Nancy?
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and I appreciate that. Not to steal any of Nancy's thunder, but I think what we're going to see with this audit report, what you will see as the committee saw when it was presented to us, is there's good news, bad news, and good news in this report. Fundamentally, the good news is that that all of our institutions and collectively the state system is doing a good job of reporting our financial status in an accurate and appropriate way that Nancy can elaborate much more efficiently than I can. The bad news is that when you look into the depths of the report, something that only the chancellor does really deep, not me. But when you do look there, you'll see that some of the problems that we have been talking about in a specific sense across the system are showing up in these audit reports in terms of just the cash flows and the balance sheet kind of stuff. So I think that's something that we need to be aware of collectively as a Board of Governors. And the other good news element of this is that I think that we are already reacting to it, the system redesign efforts that have been underway for a while now, and the activities going on with the financial stability and sustainability and the integration planning that's going on. I think the good news is that those weaknesses that are showing up in the audit report, we are in a position to address. Our universities are in a position to address, but it's going to require the continued hard work, the things that we have been doing, most recently. So with that, I'll be glad to turn it over to Nancy and let her give you the the more professional and polished version of the audit report. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Nancy? Okay, I'm sorry, I probably should introduce you a little bit more formally. This is Nancy Gunza from Clifton Larson Anderson, and thank you very much for conducting the audit. And let me turn it over to you to go through highlights of the audit.
Thank you, Cindy. And I appreciate being here, and thank you, Sam, for the introductions. My name is Nancy Gunza. I am the engagement principal in charge of all of the audit work that we do for the state system, and that includes the system-wide financial statements as well as the individual statements of the 14 universities and the Office of the Chancellor. Today, I want to talk a little bit about what we were engaged to do and the results, as Sam mentioned, of our audit. Our engagement included performing financial statement audits for both the system as a whole, in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards, as well as audits of the 14 universities and the Office of the Chancellor financial statements. The system audit has been completed. We issued our report on September 29th. I believe that has been distributed to the Board of Governors. And once these meetings are over, I think those will be made available to the public if they have not already been. Audits of the financial statements of the universities are substantially complete. We're in the reporting phase there, working with the individual universities and reviewing with their councils of trustees the final audit results. Our target date for issuance of those is November 1st, subject to the timing of the councils of trustee meetings. But they should all be, they are all in process and ready to be close to being issued. In a financial statement audit, we always talk about whose responsibility, who has responsibility for what. And the way I like to couch it is that there are really three parties involved when you're talking about a financial statement audit. There are those charged with governance, and that would be this board, the audit committee, and the local council of trustees. That is an oversight role and a policy role, as you are well aware. Management, both management at the system, at the individual universities, their responsibilities are to prepare the financial statements in accordance with the appropriate accounting policies as set by the General Government Accounting Standards Board, or GASB. They also are responsible for designing and implementing a set of financial controls to make sure that the financial reporting is accurate, as well as complies with laws and regulations. And that includes controls to prevent and detect fraud, which is something that we do look at during the audit. As auditors, it's our responsibility to perform the audit of those financial statements in accordance with the appropriate auditing standards. And in this case, it's generally accepted auditing standards and generally accepted government auditing standards. And to consider the design and implementation of the internal controls that management has put in place so that we can determine how best to perform our audit, whether there's a strong control environment, and whether there would be a need to focus on certain areas if we don't believe there is a strong control environment. It's also our responsibility to issue our auditor's opinions and other required reporting, such as the reports to the audit committee. So where did we end up? For the financial statements of the system, our independent auditor's report includes an unmodified opinion for the system as a whole. And this is one of the pieces of good news that Sam mentioned. This unmodified opinion is the best type of auditor's opinion that we can issue. It says that the report that management has prepared, the financial statements, are presented fairly in all material respects in accordance with the appropriate accounting standards. Now, the statements of the system also include the financial statements of what the accounting terminology is, are component units. You would know them as the affiliated entities of the system. So each of the universities has a foundation, and there are other component units such as student service organizations. In total, there are more than 40 organizations across the system. And all of those financial statements of those component units are combined and also presented in the financial statements of the system level. We do not audit all of those component units. We don't audit the majority of those component units, but we do make reference to them we do include them in the financial statements, and we make reference to the other auditors who have performed those audits that we rely on when we form our opinion on the component units as a whole. Also an unmodified opinion. For the university financial statements, we also expect that we will have unmodified opinions for each university and the Office of the Chancellor. In some cases, there will be an extra paragraph if management chooses not to include a management discussion and analysis, just describing that exclusion. So for all universities, and this is something I wanted to make sure we talked about today, given the environment we're in, this is something we're doing for all of our clients this year, just because of the general state of the union, if you will, with COVID and its financial impact in higher education. When management issues a set of financial statements, there is an underlying assumption that is made and an underlying assertion that is made by management that that entity has the ability to continue as a going concern for a period of time after the issuance of those statements. And that period of time is generally at least 12 months out from when the statements are issued. If there is substantial doubt about that ability to continue to operate, we ask management to look at that and to prepare a plan and have some disclosures about that plan and how they're going to address that situation to make sure that that substantial doubt can be alleviated. And the factors that are considered when we look at, is there substantial doubt? Have there been ongoing deficits, declining enrollments, declining revenues, negative cash flow? Does the entity not have enough cash reserves to get it through that period of time? Are there other debt or other long-term obligations that are coming due, or other substantial liabilities that are contingent? So, all of those are the factors that are considered. And so in some of the university audit reports, you may see some additional disclosures, and in some cases, an additional paragraph in our opinion, if any of these factors we feel and management feels are appropriate to include in those reports, given the financial condition of each individual university. Moving on. The other part of our audit that I mentioned was our consideration of internal controls. So because we do consider internal controls, we issue a report on our consideration. And I'm happy to report at both the system level and the university level that we did not identify any material weaknesses in internal control identified both for the system and at the university level. We may from time to time have other internal control comments, generally usually best practices or other opportunities to strengthen controls that don't rise to a level of a material weakness at some of the individual universities, and those are reported locally to management and the councils of trustees. Last but certainly not least, just wanted to go through some of the highlights of the financial information that has presented in the financial statements, and these charts are for the most part taken from the systems management discussion and analysis that's at the beginning of that document. And I would encourage you, if you haven't read the financial statements in detail, because I know it's tough for some folks to read through those kind of documents, but at least read the management discussion and analysis, because that is management's opportunity to take some of these numbers and explain what the impacts of the finances are for the year. So that's what this document is doing. This is the balance sheet. You will see that there you can see some of the negative impacts that Sam was talking about. The total cash and investments were down for the year. So although some of the liabilities also went down, primarily some of those long-term pension and OPEB liabilities that are not controlled by the system, but are as a result of the participation in the various pension and post-retirement benefit plans, healthcare plans. So those liabilities did go down a little bit. However, you'll see overall that the net position, which is the equity, it did rise slightly, but the unrestricted portion of that did increase. The rise is primarily related to the net investment in capital assets increasing, and you'll see a related increase in the capital assets up on the top. That really caused that part of it. There is the reason why that unfunded or unrestricted net position is negative, as you may have heard in the past, is that that includes the effect of those unfunded pension, OPEB, and other employee benefit liabilities, including compensated absences, of about 3.39 billion and 3.4 billion from the prior year. And so if you add those back in or take the impact of those out, you will see the unrestricted portion without those unfunded liabilities. The next slide is a snapshot of the revenues from the statement of revenues and expenses. Here you can clearly see the COVID impact from between the reduction of tuition and fees, which is primarily fee refunds, but really in the auxiliary enterprises is where the housing refunds and that really got hit hard because of the COVID situation. In addition, some of that tuition was also due to declining and continuing decline in enrollments. State appropriation, that increase there also includes some non-recurring funding. That includes about $17 million of the funds from the governor that were appropriated in early in the year for the Cheney loan forgiveness. So about 17 million of that is included in what was recognized in the year ended June 30, 2020. The other thing I want to point out on here, and with the asterisk, is because of the COVID situation, the system and its universities received received and recognized in this year about $74.6 million of additional funding related to from the CARES Act, from some of the monies passed through the governor and others, and that is the amount, the revenue that's recognized is the amount that's essentially been spent this year. That is a non-recurring funding stream, and when we get to the next slide, you'll see the impact of that on the results for the year. So on the next slide,
Excuse me, Nancy.
Sure.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Can you just explain under the operating revenues what other is the 44.5?
Sure. Let me get some detail here.
Because it's another, whatever it is down 24%. So I just want to know what that is.
Some of that is sales and services of the various departments. So because of the shutdown in the spring, that also hasn't had an impact on that. And then there are just some other, miscellaneous sources. But that really the big decrease was in sales and services. That was down about 8 million.
All right. Due to COVID, due to closing. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Moving over to the expense side. While operating expenses did go down, there is also an impact of the unfunded liability activity in there that also decreased it. So that was about $70 million this year. And you'll see that in the MD&A discussion about what the reduction from the unfunded liabilities is. So if you were to take that out, you would see that there would actually have been greater expenses or an increase in, or not as great of a decrease in expenses, excuse me. The bottom line here, the last line on this is the net increase in net position. But again, I would point you back to the fact that that includes at least, 2 sources of non-recurring funding, the governor's money of 17 million and the $74.5 million of the COVID money. While there will still be some monies from the COVID grants to spend for the next fiscal year. Again, taking that out is showing that would show that there really was a continuing deficit, operating deficit without that. Now, obviously, this is a special year and special situation. We've seen deficits across the industry, but we've actually also seen several institutions that have positive operating results this year because of that excess funding that was received, that one-time funding through the CARES Act. That was really what I wanted to go through and just kind of highlight this year. I do want to, as was expressed, I think in the audit committee, I want to extend my appreciation to the Shippensburg University team. They stepped in to assist with the system-wide audit over the summer in a very short period of time, and we were able to complete the audit on time due to their hard work and dedication. And also to all of the university teams, given these times that we're in, our audit was conducted completely remotely this year. And they did a lot of hard work to be able to allow us to do that. And I think it's a testament to their dedication to this reporting process and making sure that the information continues to flow and is appropriate and accurate. And I just want to close by saying we certainly appreciate the opportunity to serve as the auditors of the system and would welcome any questions or comments that you might have about our process or the audit results.
All right, Sam, do you want to moderate any questions for Nancy or the rest of the audit committee?
Sure. If any of the members of the Board of Governors, kind of found themselves feeling tingly and excited by walking through this report, Nancy, this is not a personal comment at all. You know how I am about this.
I've been doing this for a long time. I understand.
If anybody's excited about this, please talk to the chairwoman or myself, and you can be a part of it on the audit committee.
Actually, Jan Yeomans has her hand raised.
There you go.
Go ahead, Jan.
Jan, you're on mute. Jan, you're on mute.
Jan, you're still on mute.
And I'm talking away here. Nancy, a couple of questions, if you don't mind. One is on the balance sheet, and this is just one particular item. I noticed the deferred outflows had quite a change. Is there any particular explanation around that we should be aware of?
The deferred outflows are primarily related to the pension and post-retirement benefits.
Okay, that makes sense. Yep.
Yeah.
Another question that's a little bit maybe more general is why would a university omit the MD&A?
I'm not sure that's a question I can answer.
Okay, well then we'll put that on the table for somebody else to deal with later. I guess my other one is really a general big picture question. So on an organic basis, we continue to kind of dig a hole here. And certainly you're aware of the actions that are being undertaken to turn that around. Based on your experience, do you have any time estimate as to what our expectations should be for that turnaround to actually become visible and take effect?
I don't have a crystal ball, but I think that the actions that are being taken right now and the discussions that are going on are absolutely appropriate. And if they were not happening, I would be very worried about the system over the next 3 to 5 years. But I think given the direction that things are going, I think it's appropriate, and I can't give you a timeline for what the future is going to hold. But I think what you're doing is an appropriate course of action.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions or comments?
Sam, I'll just, one question, we can take it up.
I would have been disappointed had you not chimed in, Chancellor.
One question that we've taken up in the audit committee, and we could take it up further, is that one that you asked Jan about MD&A and whether that's, it's not required that we do that we do that uniformly across. Given our circumstances, we might consider that as a policy option. I think the other point I guess I wanted to raise is we have not routinely presented the audited statement to the board as a whole. It typically goes, I think, to the committee, and then the committee acts on behalf of the board to accept the audit. Given the circumstances, and given that the challenges that we're facing are now showing up in our financial report and have been for a couple of years, but as the consideration of which of our universities are going concerns continues, I think it's important for the board, given its fiduciary role, to be aware of the circumstances. The budget projections, which we looked at, I can't remember when we looked at them yesterday, as part of our appropriations requests. They are projections, and inevitably budget projections are imperfect. That's not because we are imperfect as people, because financial circumstances are such, and our organizations are as such, that it is impossible to with all the best intent and all the best data and insight, to get things absolutely correct. So the retrospective look is also important. It's good to know that that we do it well. We're doing all of our accounting and correctly according to the normal standards. But it's also, I think, important to track our progress, both as we look forward and as we look back. So you, I think, can expect, although this is not my call, but it would be my recommendation that we continue annually to present, to have this discussion and check in with ourselves and to see whether or not the progress we hope we're making is actually being made. Not just in our forward look, because that's imperfect, but in our retrospective review, which is accurate.
Yeah, Dan, thank you very much for saying it. I just want to chime in.
I can't find a hand raise on my screen at all, so I just jumped in here. Sam, I just wanted to say that the one thing I did find tingly in the report was the fact that our student aid was up 58%, which I think is a move in the right direction and encouraging.
Thank you, Tom. That's a good thing. It's one of the things that you do get out of those reports, is that there's just a ton of information, and from kind of all different perspectives, and it does give you different angles of view of where we are and how we're doing. Cindy?
Thanks, Sam. I just had wanted to chime in, and Tom, that was a great comment. I appreciate it. Jan, yours as well. And we'll have to talk about the management discussion and analysis. So thank you for that. And I just wanted to piggyback on what Dan said. It's absolutely our fiduciary duty as a board to hear the audit report as a board. We don't take an action on it, formally, but it's very necessary for us to be doing it. I take responsibility that we haven't been doing it, but no matter what our circumstances are, we should be, and going forward, we will every year as part of a board meeting. But I think what Dan said also from a strategy point of view is critically important. I don't like to be the one that looks backward, but for oversight purposes, you have to do that. And there's a balance between that and looking forward, which we're getting better and better at. But we have to make sure we not only maintain that balance, but as Dan says, that we verify. And the only way you verify it, is looking at the objectively, independently audited financials. So I just want to make that point, and thank you, Dan, for making that point, and Sam for presenting the audit.
And
Cindy,
Sam,
just
there's one more question from Jan.
Go ahead, Jan. You're on mute again.
This is ignorance on my part, but is there a quarterly audit that's prepared? Or is it just annual?
We only perform annual.
Yeah.
Annual, okay, all right, thanks for that.
And I do want to make one comment on Tom's comment. Unfortunately, Tom, that increase in student aid includes one-time student aid from the CARES Act.
Yeah.
Significant amount, 35
Of
million.
about, 31.5 million. There'll be a little bit more of that for next year, but most of that was spent this year.
Thank you, Nancy. He was getting excited about it. And then
I'm sorry to burst your bubble.
Excitement.
And it's okay, because we're going to go out and fundraise for it to replace it.
Cindy, if I could just one thing to piggyback. I think it is a good idea to bring this report before the whole board. It is something that at least makes you pause and think. It gives, that other information that people can delve into if they choose. And in addition to that, I think from time to time, there's other things going on that are kind of under the auspices of the audit committee that have to do with risk assessment.
Mhm.
And I believe at some point there are things that, at least the board should be aware of. It's not like anybody's keeping secrets what's going on, but there's a lot behind the scenes of risk assessment that kind of falls under that domain that, I think, might be of interest and all to the board as a whole. So I
Yes.
would recommend that from time to time, once a year or whatever you deem, appropriate, that it would be good to have a little bit of discussion on this beyond just the report that Nancy presented to us today.
Yeah, absolutely true. I mean, technically, this is the Audit and Risk Committee, I believe. And we, do have an internal audit function, that we carry out as a system. And so I agree with you. So in future meetings, we'll figure out how to structure that, but that absolutely should be part of what we do as a board. Okay, Sam, does that end the report of the audit committee?
That's all we have. Nancy, once again, thank you. It's been enjoyable working with you over the years that I've been on this Board of Governors. And I know you've told us that you won't be back next year because you're going to retire from this world. So God bless you, and I hope all goes well for you. And thank you for your kind work.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nancy. Okay, now we are going to transition into the Governance and Leadership Committee meeting. So as a reminder for everyone,
Actually, Madam Chair, before we do that, we were going to
Oh,
do
Tiffany, that's absolutely 100% right. I was too far ahead in my little cheat sheet here. So I do apologize. Thank you for doing that, Randy. So Tiffany Hayes, you're on the phone line. I apologize profusely that our technology sort of failed us yesterday, and you were cut off as you were speaking. We in no way meant to show any disrespect. Again, we apologize. We're delighted that you're back, and we would be very interested and really want to hear the rest of your statement. We so appreciate that you're taking the time both yesterday and today to speak with us. So Tiffany, if I can call on you, please.
Good morning, Chairwoman, and thank you for that. Chancellor and board members, thank you for addressing and clearing up my concerns and calling me back. I will conclude with asking you to include and invest in your essential workers because we are the heartbeat and backbone of Lock Haven University. And what's more, we strive for progress within our community because we are a part of its progress. In conclusion, we have done more with less to keep the facilities department functioning at its very best. We look to you in support of our efforts. We have been committed to building on, retaining, and investing our lives at Lock Haven University. Now we ask you to remain invested in your essential staff. Thank you very much for your time.
Again, thank you so much, Tiffany. We so appreciate that you spoke with us. Everybody I know at Lock Haven so appreciates what you and your colleagues do, and we do as a board as well. So thank you so much again.
Thank you.
Great. And now we are going to transition to a meeting of the Governance and Leadership Committee. And so let me just remind you all again that we encourage all board members to engage in the dialogue and discussion during this and any committee meeting, and ask that only committee members vote on any action items that come up. And then when we reconvene as a full board, we have an opportunity to vote on these, on any actions. So with that, can I hand the virtual gavel to Don Hauser, Chairman?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Yeah, and to your point about roll call or members of the committee, I know, Sharisa, you did a master roll call, the entire board, but if we could please do a roll call of committee members. If you have that handy, great. If not, I have it. Thank you. If you could just do that for us quickly.
We have you as chair.
Yeah, here.
Governor Alexander Fifolt.
Here.
Governor Smith.
Yes, sir.
And Senator Scott Martin.
Here.
Senator Judith Schwank. Governor David Mazer. And Chair Cynthia Shapira.
Here.
I had to unmute. I'm David Mazer's here. I raised my hand, but I realized.
Saw that. Thank you. All right. You have a quorum.
Thank you. Yeah, wonderful. Thank you for that. Once again, as you know, this committee is focused on ensuring the excellence and best practices in executive management of the system and its universities. And the committee provides strategic leadership and policy oversight regarding the effective distribution of authority, accountability, and responsibility among the Board of Governors, Councils of Trustees, the Chancellor, and our presidents. Today's only item of business falls into our role of advancing good governance, and also falls to us via the recently enacted Act 50. So we're pleased that we have the opportunity to appoint a student trustee to the Cheney University Council of Trustees. And with that, it's in your packet, but I'd ask Randy to brief us on this action item and follow along with your board packets as well. Randy, to you.
You bet. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning. And as Don said, you know, Act 50 provided new powers and duties to the Board of Governors, in which the board now is responsible for the appointment of student members to the Council of Trustees and also student members to the Board of Governors. Of course, today we're only talking about the appointment of student trustees. But I did want to just point out that at our next meeting, we will be bringing you a proposed process for recruiting and vetting student members of the Board of Governors. And we look forward to that conversation in February. But again, to today's conversation, I'll talk a little bit about the student trustee appointment process. You know, for years, the universities have utilized a locally developed recruiting process to both identify, recruit, and vet potential candidates in order to make a recommendation for appointment. And we are working with the university's chiefs of staff and their presidential assistants to update that process to bring it in line with Act 50. For example, the new law allows both undergraduate and graduate students to be appointed to councils of trustees. And so we want to make sure that the process that the universities are using reflects that, and that we update the board's policy accordingly. The selection process the universities use for this has always been driven significantly at the local level. And fundamentally, we believe it should remain that way. We all know that universities know their students best. And so the primary change for the student trustee selection process will really come at the end, in which the appointment is now made by the Board of Governors rather than the governor. But we also want to ensure that we incorporate any other concerns or questions that this committee will have going forward. So even while we work on updating that process, and we'll bring that to you again at the next meeting, we do have some appointments coming along the way. And today we are honored to bring to you Kiana Roberts, who has been recommended by the university to serve on the Council of Trustees. And Mr. Chair, I would happily yield to President Walton to say a few words on that recommendation.
Thank you, Randy. It's a pleasure to introduce Kiana Roberts, who epitomizes academics, character, and social responsibility here at Cheney University. She is a first-generation rising senior from a vibrant community in New Jersey, the oldest of 4 children, and she's an intelligent, inquisitive, and well-rounded individual with a major in hotel and restaurant management, with a grade point average of 3.8. Kiana has proven to be a tremendous asset to Cheney University. She's a student worker. She volunteers. She actually works part-time. She was selected this year as one of the White House HBCU competitive scholars, and that's 44 individuals nationally that were recognized for academic achievement, civic engagement, and creativity. We are very proud of Kiana. She was also selected as Miss Cheney by the student body. She's a Keystone Honors Academy Humphrey Scholar, and being a student representative of the council allows her to have greater impact on Cheney University. So I'm pleased to present Kiana Roberts to you this morning.
And Mr. Chairman, just so you know, to close this out, the staff has reviewed the information provided by the university and finds no reason not to support the nomination of Kiana Roberts. Mr. Chairman, that concludes our report.
Thank you, Randy. Thank you, President Walton, for those remarks. We appreciate that. With that, committee members, can I have a motion to recommend the appointment of Kiana Roberts to the Council of Trustees at Cheney University of Pennsylvania?
So moved.
Wonderful. And there's a second. Any discussion? And please open this up to anybody. Any discussion on this action item?
Just a comment in general, I think it'd be kind of interesting if we could have the students attend board meetings if it's not too much of an inconvenience for you to meet them. But I don't want to make that a requirement if they can't attend or anything like that.
All right. I think we can look at that, but certainly on the Board of Governors appointments moving forward and developing that policy moving forward. Alex, thanks for that. With that, all in favor? Aye.
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 Wonderful. Opposed? Wonderful. Again, thank you, committee members. This will appear on the agenda in a few minutes for the full board, I believe. And Madam Chair, that concludes our committee. So committee adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, Don, and thank you, Governance and Leadership Committee. Appreciate that. And the only comment I would add is that I think that the fact that Act 50 has given us now the authority to approve these students to these positions will expedite it and make sure that we always have the student voice at the governance level, which is the point, and certainly one of the points of improving governance and leadership. So thank you again. We are now officially back in the full board meeting. So I'm going to go a little out of order on our agenda and call first for an approval of that Governance and Leadership Committee action. So is there a motion that the board appoints Kiana T. Roberts to the Council of Trustees at Cheney University of Pennsylvania?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Okay, is there any further discussion? Okay.
No hands raised.
No hands raised? Okay, that's good. Representative Roy, are you raising your hand or you're just fussing with your, okay, fine. Fine. All in favor then, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Very good. The motion carries. Congratulations, Ms. Roberts, and welcome to the Cheney University Council of Trustees and to the system as well, system governance as well. Now, may I please turn again to Don Hauser to present the recommendations of the Faculty Shared Governance Commission, which you have also chaired.
Thank you.
Okay, before he, actually, just 1 second, Don, before you do go into this,
Sure.
I basically just want to say thank you to you and to the commission who took on this challenge about a year ago, not even knowing, obviously, that the pandemic would occur and sidetrack the work a little bit, but you managed to bring everything back on track and to this point. So I really appreciate both your efforts and the efforts of everyone who worked on the commission to, act on a timely basis and get these recommendations to the board. This is really a momentous occasion, I think, as well, in terms of hearing the recommendations of the Faculty Shared Governance Commission and actually, making faculty shared governance a reality at the system level. And a lot of hard work has gone into this. So I'm sorry. Now I will turn it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you for the kind words. And boy, I think it's about a year since you developed the commission. So it's a year's work. I know we didn't meet your timeline at the very beginning. We apologize for that. But I think at the end of the day, we have a good product, which we'll talk about right now. At the outset, I want to thank you for your leadership on this, obviously, and sticking with this commission the whole way through all of our meetings. The chancellor, his entire team who pitched in, Randy, of course, Donna, who's probably sitting on the call somewhere, for your participation. Most importantly, thanking the commission members that were appointed to this commission. And I think there are some slides that we'll see that we can follow along as I talk about these. There you have the commission members. So these commission members, they committed their personal time over the past 8 to 12 months when we've all had a lot more to do, right? Especially with the times that we're in. But it's important now, this slide is why. It's important to understand why we are undertaking this effort. And the chairwoman has talked about this many times in our meetings and at the onset when developing the commission and set a crystal clear path of why she and now we think this commission is necessary. And having served on LHU Council of Trustees at one point, I know how important it is to hear faculty perspective on strategic matters. Our universities enjoy a wide range of local shared governance arrangements with faculty and others, but at the system level, our interaction with faculty is primarily through the lens of collective bargaining, as we all know. And while that's important in our operations, there should be a way for us to get faculty input on those system level matters that do not involve collective bargaining issues. Given our ongoing system redesign, it seems more important than ever that we have that. And with that, there's a core charge of our commission, which is enhanced faculty shared governance at the system level. And there you see, once again, commission members and the constituencies they represent. And it's a cross-representative group that really did some amazing work. It included faculty members, union leaders, university leaders, and leadership from among our board of governors and councils of trustees. And once again, all along, Cindy was there. Dan was present at all of our meetings, Randy, Donna, etc., to help us get through this, navigate it, and put together what you're ultimately seeing today. So you see our path to system level shared faculty governance. We've talked about this in our meetings up to today of the steps that we've met and where we were in this timeline. But there's basically the path that you see right in front of you that we undertook to get to today. Key among those stakeholders were 14 members of the interim faculty council, which includes an elected faculty representative from each university. And draft recommendations that we're reviewing today were posted online from all the way back in August, so we can all provide feedback or look at it, not provide feedback, but just on feedback, but understand where we are. Importantly, our work was grounded by a set of 10 guiding principles that we developed early on in the commission, maybe at our first or second meetings, and these were also vetted by our stakeholder groups. You've seen these before. We've talked about them up to this process. You'll see themes of respect, accountability, trust. They're common threads that tie all these issues together. You've seen this slide before. The next one, potential system level issues for faculty input. You've seen this before. It shows a matrix of potential system level issues that would benefit from faculty input beyond what we talked about, collective bargaining. So you can see these issues fall into 3 large buckets that represent a cross-section of our entire enterprise at the state system. So how do we build the system level faculty shared governance? We have a system level faculty council. So after many discussions about shared governance models that currently exist at the university level and further exploration of system level models that exist elsewhere, the commission determined that we would be best served by establishing a permanent faculty council for system level issues. In doing so, it's important to understand that such a council would do what it would do and understand what it would not do. And most notably, we agreed that this council would serve as an advisory body for strategic conversations around system level policies and efforts, and be a conduit to the faculty for input. On the flip side, we agreed that the council should not interfere in university level shared governance or act as some sort of court of appeals for local decisions. It was also agreed that this body should steer clear of any matters that were strictly the domain of collective bargaining. You've likely read in the agenda packet about our 4 primary roles and responsibilities of the council. The first 2 we've already talked about, providing input on system level matters and serving as conduits to the faculty on those matters. The third is that the council would be responsible for choosing the faculty liaison to the Board of Governors, a role that Dr. Phillips currently holds on an interim basis, and we thank him for that. Lastly, the council would draft and maintain a charter that articulates its operations, including issues like terms of office, term limits, meeting frequency, and those types of issues. The commission recommends that the faculty council be equally representative of all universities in the system, rather than having membership be apportioned based on the size of the universities. Elections for the council would be held at each university based on their local processes, and they would be guided by the council's charter to provide some common ground. We also thought it was important that the council have access to members of the chancellor's executive team so they can create real, meaningful dialogue about issues, which is the whole point of shared governance. And creating those opportunities and for partnership, deep dialogue, it was the driving force behind the commission's discussion regarding where the council fits in the overall framework of the state system. You've seen this chart before. It represents the system leadership model that Dan introduced not long after arriving here as chancellor. It shows how various groups of vice presidents provide input and guidance to the executive leadership group, which is made up of the chancellor and our presidents, who in turn provide leadership to the system and input to this Board of Governors so we can make policy decisions. The commission feels that the faculty council should be included in the system leadership group so the faculty voice can be heard on issues as they develop. There you see that yellow box, that yellow bucket. To be clear, the issue this issue required the most discussion so that we could address the concerns about potential conflicts of interest and having the faculty as part of this group. In the end, we firmly believe that interactions with that SLG can be structured to mitigate any such risk. In fact, we do it here with this board with our own faculty liaison. Next steps. So a vote of approval today will officially set in motion a permanent system level faculty council. We would charge the office of the chancellor to work with the currently seated interim faculty council to operationalize these details. And the IFC I can tell you is already working on a draft charter that we just talked about so the new council can hit the ground running. And so while this is happening, the chancellor's staff and the IFC will also finalize policy language that would capture the recommendations before us today, including the codification of a board liaison role, and bring that policy for a final vote at our February meeting. We recommend the policy be reviewed regularly in the early years so that course corrections can be made if necessary in order to keep the effort on track. So there we have it. You have the recommendations. We've talked about it along the way in our meetings since the development of the commission. And I'm pleased to say that a week ago, these recommendations were unanimously approved by the commission. So they're before you today, and we're happy to take any questions that you may have.
And we do have, Madam Chair, Alex and Jan lined up with their hands.
Terrific. Okay, Alex, why don't you start?
I have a question around the areas that the faculty council would focus on in their support for the executive leadership group. And it was one that I didn't actually notice, and that's academic advising. At our board meeting about a year ago, we talked about holistic advising as a critical piece to support our students. And I'm a little confused as to why this wasn't included in this piece here as an academic area of concern that we have identified in the past that needs to be improved upon. Is there any plans or work to include that as a role for this group to advise the executive leadership group on?
On academic advising?
Yes.
Well, we have in these buckets that you see in the Chancellor's System Leadership Group, you have vice presidents, and chief academic officers, and student affairs, enrollment management buckets, and now faculty. Each one of those components, through reporting on campus, academic advising reports into these buckets. So I think the voices are heard. Do we need a separate bucket in Dan's, the Chancellor's System Leadership Group just for academic advising? Probably not. But those concerns, I'm sure, are raised on the local level before the SLG even meets. If those issues arise as importance on the local campus throughout the system.
Well, I would push back a little bit and say we have a lot of points here about areas that they're focusing on, and one of those points should be academic advising and holistic advising. That is a critical need for students right now to be improved upon, and that's currently the responsibility of the faculty. I think that's restricted to faculty, and I think improvement needs to be built there. To support something like this, I think that's one of the key pieces here. I think that's a system level issue that's related to the academic enterprise for sure.
I can try to respond, Alex, a little bit. So when we talk about academic advising is covered by the collective bargaining agreement. And so that's part of the duties and responsibilities of professors built into the CBA. And so really, when we talk about academic advising and any role that the faculty council would have to have in that, we'd have to be very careful about what exactly it is that we'd be talking about in terms of academic advising, because any evaluations or anything along those lines, any types of prescriptions about what faculty have to do in terms of advising, that's really going to be a contractual issue that would have to be dealt with through the CBA. Broader issues of academic advising certainly could be something we could talk about. And that's probably why this would be an area that we wouldn't want to necessarily specifically identify as simply being a shared governance issue. It'd be something that we probably have to take up piecemeal, but only when we're clear about the delineation of responsibilities for shared governance relative for the FC relative to something that might happen in statewide meet and discuss.
So
not what I keep from Jan responding real quick, but how do we move forward on this? I guess is my question. Is there a pathway?
So let me, okay, and then I'll turn it over to Dan, who will be far more learned and erudite than I will be on this response. But, Alex, I totally agree with you. It's something that I have a particular interest in and a particular point of view on. To piggyback on what Jamie said, unfortunately, for all of us, it's complicated in that right now it's under the purview of the collective bargaining agreement. It doesn't mean that faculty as well, and those with whom we've spoken and who participated with us, when we were negotiating the contract with AppScuff, don't agree that academic advising is critically important to student outcomes. And I believe, in Dan, I'll ask you to, clarify this. I think we talked about that during the negotiation process and talked about maybe having some pilot projects that looked at, the possibility of holistic or case management style advising models. So again, it's not a good answer to say that it's complicated, but unfortunately it is complicated, but it is something, that's, I think, very much on the front burner for all of us.
Yeah, thanks, Cindy. And Alex, that's a great question. I mean, look, we have to do, especially now, given our conversation yesterday about the impacts that the pandemic is having on our students, mental health and anxiety, et cetera. We have to do better in terms of the kind of supports that we offer our students to improve their improve their chances of continuing making good academic progress and completing their degrees. We're showing some uptick, as you know, reported yesterday. We're seeing some year-on-year uptick in student retention. We're not back to where we were a decade ago, but we're on our way. I think that represents the good and hard work that's being done at our universities. But we have a lot more to do, and we have a lot more to do in ways that not to affect all of our students and some student groups, as you know, in particular low-income students, students of color. And we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to the next agenda item. So I think of that in terms of student supports, and that is actually represented on the slide, and the I don't know, Randy, now I've lost the slide, but it is represented in that second. It was in that second box, right? System-wide efforts to improve student enrollment and/or retention, right? So there's a whole bunch of things in there, which include advising, and advising is a lot more than just academic advising. Academic advising is super important, and academic advising is defined in the contract. But generally supporting students and coaching them and encouraging them and providing the supports that they need in order to continue is a broader set of efforts. And where those efforts take on a kind of a system-wide flavor, and to your point, they should and they ought to, because it is so urgent and so important. There may be things that we can do acting together, then they would be issue to be discussed within the context. Story against ourselves, in the we were working, as you know, through system redesign. We had committees on advising and one on mental health and wellness, and then this pandemic thing got in the way, and we found ourselves, all of us really refocusing our efforts on figuring out how to manage through a very difficult set of semesters. Our hope is that as we get back to something like a stable footing, we can re-engage in those critically important efforts. So I think we're covered, Alex, if not specifically with respect to academic advising, because that is a contractual issue. I think we're covered with respect to student supports. And to your point, it is probably one of the most important things we can focus on.
It's absolutely one of the most important things to focus on, no question. Academic advising is key to student success, and every faculty member is on board with what you're saying, Alex. Absolutely right. Systematic, being very careful about how we do things so that we delineate things in the appropriate fashion and make shared governance work.
We have Jan, then Representative Roy.
My question was just a more general one for Don. Hi. And this has to do with the membership on the faculty council. Was there discussion of term limits, and how do you think about making sure that we always have fresh perspectives coming in, and so that we benefit from all the talent that's out there?
I can respond to that, Jan, if you like. So
Excellent.
we've already begun the process. We've already had a meeting where we've set the broad parameters for what we're going to be doing in terms of our charter, but also our bylaws. And the issue of term limits is absolutely on the table. So although we've not finalized the document, I don't want to speak out of turn. I think the general consensus was having something along the lines of term limits, even if somebody could come back after a certain period of time and go back on the board, because we do want to make sure that we have, you want to have the ability to have people have enough of a term where they get familiar with the system, they're able to learn their job and then do their job appropriately. But we also want to make sure that we have good turnover, that we again bring in fresh ideas, fresh voices. So we're trying to hit that balance, and term limits is one way to hit that balance. And so that's certainly on the table for us. And
Yeah.
do our presentation probably when we come back in February.
That's great. My experience is that a limit of 2 3-year terms is
Yeah.
good. Because then after 6 years, you get somebody else to give a different perspective.
Right.
Yeah, to follow up, Jan, that was an important consideration for the commission was term limits. And I know the IFC is developing the charter as we speak. And Dr. Phillips, correct me if I'm wrong, but I know that you're thinking about on the outset staggered terms. So you have a staggered membership.
We want to ensure that there's continuity of knowledge and expertise on the council. So along with term limits, staggered terms is something we're doing as well. Yeah.
Excellent. You've got this. Good.
And Representative Roy.
Thank you. Overall, I think this is a good concept, shared governance. That's a hard word to say. Overall, it's a good concept. And I have appreciated that we've, had the faculty liaison at board meetings. I think that's important. I think it's a good idea. And I appreciate all the work that everybody put into this. But I think to actually the part here where it says, the Board of Governors should make every effort to seek statutory changes to allow the faculty representative to be a full voting member. I don't think that's necessary. I think that goes too far. I guess I look at this as more about, we like the input, they're boots on the ground. They know what's going on at the local universities. That's great. We should be listening to them. We should be getting good suggestions from them. But to actually, add a board seat, I just don't think that's the direction that we want to go. So many things that we do. I think I read in here someplace or somebody mentioned about conflicts of interest. So many things the board does, it could create an appearance of a conflict of interest or a real conflict of interest if a board member was basically voting on things that impacted themselves. If the faculty rep was an actual board member, the collective bargaining agreement, the faculty member of the board could vote for their own union contract as an employee and as a board member. They could vote on it twice. And, hiring university presidents. I'm thinking about when we're in executive session, discussing legal matters and stuff. It just doesn't seem like it's a good idea to have the liaison is a great idea, like we've been doing, but to have that person be an actual board member, I just don't think that's a good idea.
I'm going to push back on you, Brad, just a little bit. So first off, anytime there's a vote on a collective bargaining agreement, I'm going to assume that the faculty council member is going to have to recuse themselves from something like that. So anytime there's an issue that is, we have a clear conflict of interest, certainly it would be the case that you'd have the faculty council member step off. They're not going to be voting on their own contract. But when it comes to other issues, we already have students serving on the board and they get to vote. Right? So students are important to the system, no question about it, but faculty represent and constitute the system. And therefore they should have a right to at some point vote on things that are going to impact the entire system. And so this is perspective. Certainly we're simply asking for an opportunity to get a vote. It hasn't happened yet. It may not happen. It'd be something where we have to demonstrate. I have to demonstrate, whoever replaces me has to demonstrate that they can do things that are going to be useful to the commission, to the board, where they're going to be providing valuable input and where their vote could matter. There might be a point where the faculty member on that council needs to say, I vote against this and explain why. And what they say and why they vote no might be very important. It might be something that somebody else needs to hear. So it's only one vote. In no way could it in any way tip the favor of any policy. You're asking for one vote on a board of a dozen members. At 24 members, I don't see how that's going to somehow change anything. It's a matter of being respectful to the fact that we are constituted by faculty, that we have individuals who are managers who are part and parcel of Board of Governors on a regular basis, and students get to vote too. So it's a simple respect issue, and conflicts of interest can be dealt with on a piecemeal basis when they come up. It is something that we wish to see happen. Faculty should have a vote when it comes to issues that involve us. We have votes at local governments. I serve and have served as chair of the faculty senate locally 3 terms, and I get to vote on policies. I don't get to make the policies, but I get to vote on those policies and whether or not they go to our president for final decision making. So I understand that there might be issues of conflict of interest that's happened, but this would be an issue that would be an issue for the future whenever this does happen. It's certainly not an issue for this particular document. And I think it's something that faculty would be useful in terms of the process of voting on things, that we would serve a good process. It would be a good thing for us to have, and it'd also be a good thing for the Board of Governors. So the value of faculty votes is something we can discuss later, but the notion that somehow it would be inappropriate or that it would somehow violate proper procedure, I don't think that that's true.
So if I can just piggyback on that, and then I know, Dan, you might want to say something, and Senator Martin, I know that you're raising your hand. So I just want to acknowledge that, Sam, as well. We'll get to everyone. And Representative Roy, you know, obviously you raise a point of concern. I think as Dr. Phillips has said, that isn't something that we need to hammer out right now. That is for future discussion. There's going to be a lot of discussion. There are going to be a lot of opinions one way or the other, you know, when we reach out to our stakeholders in the legislature, et cetera. So we'll have an opportunity for a full discussion. At this point, I would also point out that there are ways that universities handle this by allowing faculty representation, or actually, I shouldn't say allow, embracing faculty representation on a board with the understanding that if there's a direct matter of conflict of interest or a personnel matter that's dealt with in executive session, that faculty board member is recused. So there are precedents for how to handle this. You know, in terms of our student Board of Governors members, they're also voting, you know, in their interests. When they take a vote on tuition, for example, they speak to it and they vote on it. And frankly, every one of us is a political appointee. So in some sense, you know, we're sort of doing the same thing. I think the critical thing is that taken as a whole, this moves us to a level of governance that is better because there's more input, there's more transparency, there is more opportunity to hear these perspectives in a place where it matters, right? Where, you know, it's being live streamed on YouTube, and you know, people make statements that they have to make commitments to, and it's important to get to that place in terms of good leadership and transparency. And the other thing that goes with that is once somebody is sitting on that Board of Governors and we're discussing these issues, we put on the hat as a board, and not, even though we bring a perspective because of our, you know, individual beings and identities, we bring that to the discussion, but we wear a hat that says I'm discussing issues and voting on them in the interest of the system for the best interest of the students. And we always try to make that distinction when we sit as a Board of Governors. So these are all things that we'll be considering and talking about, but, you know, I just wanted to contribute that to the mix. I don't know, you know, I can't even remember, Don, am I
this is yours, yeah, Madam Chair.
Mine now, okay. Sorry about that. Okay, then let me call on Senator Martin. I think your hand was next.
Yep, thank you, Madam Chair. You know, I just wanted to echo some of the concerns from my colleague in the House. You know, I've negotiated contracts in my days as a commissioner, and I can tell you that from a legal, there's things that really would need to be looked at in terms of the legal aspects of conflicts of interest, of sitting on different sides of opposing with the boards, and the access to knowledge in terms of negotiations or throwing ideas out there. Now, I do appreciate the word embrace that you use in terms of getting the involvement of everyone in our institutions and in improving things moving forward. But the other thing I want to be careful of, because these are going to be the exact kind of questions that you would get approaching the General Assembly in order to make any of these changes, is, at what point, there's a lot of folks that make these systems work, right? A lot of just valuable contributions to make, meeting the mission of all our 14 institutions. But when you look at each and every one, are we going to then guarantee whatever they come from in terms of their contribution to it? Are they all going to be given a board seat at the table? Are we now going to have a president seat? Are we going to have a council of trustees seat guaranteed on the board? So there's a lot more that we need to think about in terms of the ramifications of that. And I appreciate I think someone brought up about the fact that the students are there. We don't engage in contracts with those students from the Board of Governors perspective. So I just wanted to put that out there, something for people to think about, because when it comes to the General Assembly, it's pretty much going to be those concerns that are raised. Now, having said all that, that whole concept of us pulling everyone together in involvement and getting all their input before decisions are made and working collaboratively, amen, absolutely. That's what we should always be working towards. But in terms of legal walls, I think we have to be really careful. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Okay, I appreciate that. Your points are very well taken. Let me go to Sam Smith now.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Really, I have a point of order. Is there something in what's being presented that specifically would say that by voting for this, we are committing to lobbying the legislature to include faculty on the Board of Governors as a statutory matter? Is there anything in this proposal that states that clearly?
Let me. I would maybe ask either Randy or even Andy to respond to that. My sense of it is that we are voting on, the organizational structure and framework. We are not necessarily committing ourselves to recommendations beyond that. So, that's my interpretation, but obviously, we need
if you look at
legal interpretation of this, or Randy from
I'll be happy to jump in. We're essentially looking at the recommendation section of the white paper document, which is items 3A all the way down to 3C and 4, which is additional recommendations. And so this doesn't commit the board to anything. It just simply says that we're supportive of the idea of that. But as Senator Martin and Senator Roy said, that has to occur as separate action that would have to be, pursued in a legislative matter. So it's not, fully binding in any certain way.
Well, thank you. I certainly am sympathetic to, what's being said about this. And I agree with Chairman Roy that if by voting for this, I was somehow saying, I'm going to be on board with lobbying, with promoting to the legislature that they should do this, I'd have a little problem with that myself. And from past times when we talked about presenting stuff to the legislature, I kind of always have suggested that if we don't speak with one voice, we really are going to be in trouble. So, if that is part and parcel of this recommendation, I would suggest that something needs to be, clarified or edited out of it, because we don't want to be jumping out. I just think it's bad timing to get into a debate over something like this. That clouds the bigger picture of what is good that the committee has brought forth. And that's why I asked the point of order, by voting for this, if somehow we were, committing to go to the legislature and seek, additional legislative changes in terms of the makeup of the board. If that's the case, then then we've got a problem.
Well, I think, so my point of view is that, so there's one of two ways we can go. You know, I'm looking at this as we want to get this thing set up, the structure and the organization and the process. So we can do one of two things. We could probably just separate out those recommendations from the actual motion that we're going to be looking at. Or we can think of it as we're simply accepting, hearing the recommendations as part of this report, which would not, to me, indicate that we're making, I don't see it as making a commitment to do it. I see it as saying, you know, okay, you've made your report, commission, and, you know, we accept that by taking this action. And the part we're going to implement has to do with the structure. But if it's cleaner to separate out those recommendations, then I would, you know, propose that we think about that. But I again, I need to defer to Andy.
Madam Chair, if I may, good morning. Just so we're clear, the motion that is drafted and before you is that the board approves the recommendations. And what Dr. Goen was referencing is on page 52, included in those recommendations at 3A2, the Board of Governors should make every effort to seek statutory changes to allow faculty representative to be a full voting member. So as worded, it does have the impact of Vice Chair Smith's concern, I believe.
Okay, so then would there be a motion then to separate out just the piece of the report that speaks to the organizational structure and process? And Randy, you'll have to give me where page numbers.
Yeah, so you could, if you desire, you could move to separate item 3A2 and then vote on the rest of the recommendations as one, and then vote on 3A2 as a separate one.
Cindy, before we do that, can I just maybe say a few words?
Please, yes, please.
We are talking about really fundamentally transforming this institution, its universities, and the system, you know, in the interest of our students. And we are doing pretty much everything we can all at once, you know, to address the concerns that were raised in the auditor's report, but also, you know, in recognition of the fact that the needs of our students, the needs of our communities, the needs of our employers are changing, our student body is changing, and our students need different things from us. In the way that Alex pointed out, it's a fundamental transformation of who we are and what we do, and it entails, at least in my view, being willing to suspend our disbelief, often in one another, and go forward, you know, with a sense of trust and faith into a new world. We are not going to accomplish any of the goals that we set ourselves out to achieve unless we are able to improve the kind of relations that we have with our faculty. We have very good relations at some of our universities, and they have been challenged at the system level in part because that's where contracts are negotiated, but also in part because we haven't had structures in place to enable the freer flow of information, communication, shared governance, faculty shared governance. So it seems to me that it is a statement of intent to figure this out. Will we ultimately succeed in navigating the General Assembly and changing the structure of the board? Who knows? But I don't think we're going to be modeling, and our leadership is critical here, the kinds of behaviors that we are expecting all of our employees to exhibit. If we say, well, we'll trust us only this far, but not take that next step. And I you know, obviously, as a chancellor, I'm not a voting member of the board, but this is a critical moment. And to me, it's actually a critical opportunity to demonstrate not leadership, of course, but trust. So, I mean, it's a cultural moment. So I would ask us to consider what kind of culture we're asking our communities to evolve.
It's a culture where you want to build consensus.
It's a culture where we want to engage in very difficult conversations. I do not believe that consensus is not, we will never gain complete consensus with every decision that needs to be made. This is not about binding ourselves to a consensus, to me anyway, to a consensus-driven decision-making approach. It is putting in place the structures that really require us to have conversations which may be very difficult and very contentious and yet take place.
I understand that. I understand that building a consensus isn't a matter of always getting there. It's really about the process of trying to build it. You do this regularly, Chancellor. That's part of your outreach, talking to going to the campuses and stuff. You're just, constant communication. That's part of building consensus.
Yeah.
I understand. I think I hear what you're saying here, but
Thank you.
I just think that part of that consensus building is about all of us, the Board of Governors, at least airing out and talking about what our thoughts and views are. And at some point, I'm more than willing to step back from a position I have and say I can understand the bigger picture that you're talking about, but I can't do that without us building some, at least, if not consensus, at least an acceptance.
And I, and I have other people I'm going to call on. Dan, I totally appreciate and agree in my heart where you're coming from. I also see this as something that I don't want to have derailed if people are not comfortable with an aspect of it, which, I don't consider to be an obligation, but, our attorney has said might actually obligate the Board of Governors in terms of the way it's written. So I am searching for a solution where we can have consensus on it at this point in time, at this moment in time, consensus on the meat of it and the intent of it, which is to move into a better phase of governance that can only help us make the hard decisions that we have to make going forward with redesign. And that's why I suggested possibly, bifurcating that piece, not tabling it forever and not, disbanding it and not rejecting it, but to say at this moment in time, where can we go that fits in with the forward trajectory we're on for redesign, in this sphere. But let me reiterate again, publicly that I 100% agree with what you're saying conceptually and would rather not do it. However, the pragmatist in me is saying, I want to move forward. How can we do that? Let me call on Stephen and then Representative Roy again, and then Alex. Stephen?
Thank
and
you,
this is a great discussion, by the way. This is exactly what we should be doing as a board. Okay, Stephen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So a piece of information that I feel as though I'm missing is, what other lines of communication do we have currently set up with faculty to have input, to have that chance to review policy and provide their feedback. Because, personally, I know that there are different avenues that we have. So what would be different from a faculty council to the faculty union or something along those lines? Because Chancellor Dan, I know that you said that we are trying to do a lot in a little bit of time. And, when that occurs, how effective can we be? So my question is, how do we create something brand new, or do we just enhance current lines of communication that are already available?
You have Representative Roy is next.
Thank you. Cindy, I interpreted this different. I mean, I think this clearly says it's not just a law, it's something we're going to look at. I mean, the wording is the Board of Governors should make every effort to seek statutory changes to allow the faculty representative to be a full voting member. So section 3A2, that should come out of here, in my opinion. And then also it hits the point again under 4.2. That recommendation says, that's on page 54, until such time that the faculty representative to the Board of Governors is statutorily created, the role of the faculty liaison to the Board of Governors should be codified in policy to allow the liaison to be included in all meetings, except when a clear conflict of interest is identified by the chair of the Board of Governors. So 4.2 needs changed also, in my opinion. The first part of that should be taken out, and then section 4.2 should start out with the role of the faculty liaison to the Board of Governors should be codified in policy. I assume they mean PASSI policy there. I think it's important that we do everything we can to make sure that the faculty liaison, is in our policy, because I like having a faculty liaison at our board meetings. I just don't think it should be a board member. So I think we should, take out 3A2 and then take out that first about 10 or 12 words in 4.2. And then I could get on board supporting this.
And next you have Alex.
I think I was really moved by what Chancellor Greenstein had said. Right now, consensus is key. Maybe before I was a little bit more at the point of why should we have a voting member? But I think there needs to be a fundamental change at the board, with the faculty, and with the students on how we can move together to create this future that we all want. I really pushed the academic advising piece because I think that is key for all of us. I don't want it to say that the faculty are representing themselves in this piece just for themselves, but I really want to be able to say, yes, I want to bring a faculty member onto our team and work with you to make this a better place. I don't want it to be a concern that it's going to be in the self-interest of faculty to come here, vote on contracts, which they wouldn't do. But for me, I want to see reassurances from ourselves to the faculty, but also from the faculty to us that we're going to be working on things together in the future that we would not have done before. That includes looking at the contract, the piece on academic advising. That includes looking and having a voting faculty member on the board. That includes seeing that role there. But I don't know if I'm comfortable right now putting the policy ahead as is without knowing what it will look like in the future, what the relationship with the union will look like, what the work will happen for students. If system redesign is supposed to be student-centered, I think there's some key things that need to be addressed. That's all I have to say.
We have Jan, then Don.
I'm sorry, Randy. I keep raising my hand. I just want to get on the list.
Okay.
Thanks.
Jan?
Yeah, thank you. I think at a time when we're really asking people to make profound changes and to do things in a different way, and everybody's going to be touched in the whole system by the change, the more inclusive we can be, the better. And I think it's important for us to allow a lot of important constituents to have a seat at the table. Whether we reach consensus or not, well, I don't know. But somebody feeling like at least they had input to the process, they understand the process, et cetera, I think has enormous value in terms of getting buy-in and support for what we want to do going forward.
Don, then Tim, then Tom.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to correct me if I'm wrong, Madam Chair, but for this item today, we're simply receiving the recommendations of the commission. We are not making new board policy today. The policy is yet to be determined or shaped, and that'll be before us at our February meeting, which will have a complete policy, board policy that we'll vote on the role of the faculty liaison. Of course, you know, the recommendations are there to help us shape that, but it's up to this board to develop board policy. And so this document is not board policy. The board policy is yet to be voted on and will be voted on and come before us in February. I think that's a proper time to include everybody's input on precisely what the role is of the faculty liaison moving forward. But I just wanted to correct me if I'm wrong. This is not an item to enact in policy these recommendations today. It's to hear and accept the role or the product of the commission, and that's it for today. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's my understanding where we are in process.
Yeah, yes, it's absolutely true that we would have to come back to actually vote on a policy. This is supposed to guide that policy. But you know, and others are in the queue, I think. But I would ask that people who are in the queue think about this idea, you know, of making a motion to approve this so it can move forward without the language 3A2 and, you know, perhaps the corresponding language from 4.2. Who else is wanting to speak, Randy?
We have Tim, then Tom.
Okay. Representative Briggs.
Thanks, Chairwoman, and thanks, Randy. I was actually clapping. I thought I was raising my hand, so I apologize about that. But I wanted to thank the Chancellor for his comments and Alex and a lot of folks. I mean, I think Don gave us a good path to get to the next meeting to approve a policy. I think that gives us a chance to work on that policy. But you know, yesterday we talked about a lot of working together and transparency and taking big steps, and those are all really exciting. Though there was one comment at the beginning of the meeting that troubled me, and it was the lack of feeling from our faculty leadership that they're a part of those conversations. And I think if we move forward as strong as we can, that voice has to be part of the conversation. And I understand, you know, there's a stakeholder relationship, but I think they really need to be part of what we do. And I think we can come up with a policy that addresses our concerns, you know, regarding conflicts. I mean, that was in the summary. But you know, we do have trustee members as Board of Governors, I believe. We have student members. We have a variety of identified universes where those members come from. So I think this is an important step to take for the steps that we want to bring. And I wouldn't support separating it out. I think it gives us some time over the next few months to really work on a good policy to take that step. So I appreciate the opportunity to talk, and I think this is an important thing to do to get us to where we want to go.
Yeah, and obviously, yeah, I mean, this is obviously a piece that needs to be discussed further. So another thought is that we can keep the motion whole and simply accept, not approve. So we could change the word, the board hereby approves to the board hereby accepts the report, you know, the Faculty Shared Governance Commission. And in that way, have more time to discuss the actual policy that would come before the board with regard to this at the next board meeting.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I understand that idea came from Andy Lehman, so I do want to give credit where credit is due.
And Tom.
And Tom, great.
Or Tom's next, I'm sorry.
Oh, and Tom's next, yeah.
Okay, I'll be very, very quick. I think you may have just gotten to where I wanted to get to anyway. I want to say I fully endorse having a voting member from the faculty on the board, but rather than get into all that debate, if in fact changing the term to accept does it I suggest we move forward that way. We're definitely not prejudiced as a board in total against what was being proposed, but I appreciate all the comments that were made today.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I mean, clearly, you know, there are different opinions, and that piece has to be discussed further.
There are no other hands raised right now.
Cindy, I don't know how to raise my hand.
I don't either, and I have a quick comment. I would like to make sure that we at least consult with our labor lawyers. Unlike all of the other constituencies we mentioned, we have a binding legal agreement with the faculty, multiple agreements with multiple different faculties, and I just don't, I want some sort of guidance from our labor council on best practices that would, you know, cover this. I don't want to do this in a vacuum.
Yeah, and we do have in this report explicitly stating on what it does not do. I'm remembering it does not, you know, conflict with or negate any portion of the collective bargaining agreement. But you're right, we need to make sure as we go forth. If there are no more hands raised now.
I can't raise my hand because.
Oh, yeah, that's right. You can't raise your hand. Go ahead.
I can do clap. I can do thumbs up. I can put a heart up.
Please put a heart up. I'd like to see that, but go ahead.
There we go. So, but I don't see, anyway. I just a friendly amendment, really building on what Tom and I think where Don was going, and Cindy, to the point that you raised. It might do to make the amendment in a way that specifically invites the policy to be returned to the board for consideration at some specific time. Because I think, aren't we actually recommending that we move forward in the process, bringing these issues back to the board?
Right. So I'm not sure. Do we have to do that as an action? Because I think that's what we're doing anyway, particularly if we change the word approve to accept.
Yeah, I was never really a close study of Robert's rules, so I'll leave it to others than me.
Me too. Randy, is if somebody offered, would it be a friendly amendment to change the word approve to the word accept?
There's been no motion made yet.
Madam Chair, there's been no motion.
No, I understand that, but would it be a friendly amendment if someone were to make that motion?
Yes, or you could change the motion before it is presented, thereby alleviating the need for any amendment. When you would read the motion and seek a second, you could read it with accepts rather than approve. And I think Chancellor Greenstein's question is whether or not language such as, and at the end where the chancellor shall take necessary steps to operationalize and present a policy for the board's future consideration. I think that is, Dr. Greenstein, is that the thrust of what you're asking?
Thank you for providing, thank you for clarifying the thrust of what I was asking. I appreciate it. Yes, I think that is exactly.
I think to the chancellor's proposition, I don't want to say it's without moment, because I think regardless whether we say that or not, before anything can be done, the board would have to create it and adopt it in policy. And I believe that's what was indicated earlier.
Right, that's what okay. All right, so yeah, I realize what you're saying. We haven't actually made a formal motion, and so therefore we don't need an amendment. We can simply present the motion differently. Is that right? Am I understanding this now?
Correct.
Okay. All right. So why don't we get to that stage, because once we have a motion on the table, if there is further discussion, we can entertain it. But I am asking if someone would move that the board hereby accepts the recommendations of the Faculty Shared Governance Commission and authorizes the Office of the Chancellor to take all necessary steps to operationalize the Permanent Faculty Council and present a policy for consideration at the next board meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, thank you. I'm assuming I did that correctly, right?
Yep, and just do discussion now.
All right, great. So now we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion on this before we take a vote?
And Representative Roy has his hand up.
Okay, Representative Roy?
Thank you. For people that can't find the hand raise thing, if you go to where it says participants,
right,
that's where you raise hands. It's not where the 3 dots are in the top right hand corner. But anyways, I appreciate the effort to try to get consensus here, but changing approves to accept. I mean that doesn't quite do it for me. And I mean the document not once but twice has recommendations about making it a voting member. So I'm not going to be able to support this. I absolutely want the faculty liaison to be at every meeting. I appreciate him being here at every meeting, but I'm not going to repeat everything I already said. But I don't think changing the word to accept instead of approves really changes it that much. Thank you.
So let me just say that accept means to my, and again, please correct me if I'm wrong, Andy, I'm taking that to mean that as a board, we have received the recommendations of the Faculty Shared Governance Commission. So accept in the sense of have received it.
That would be my understanding as well, okay, as opposed to a synonym for approved.
Okay, so we could have a friendly amendment to say hereby receives the recommendations of the Faculty Shared Governance Commission. If that makes you more comfortable, someone can suggest that or not. We can move on to any further discussion, any other amendments on the table and a vote.
Senator Martin has his hand raised too.
Okay, Senator Martin.
I appreciate the second half of the motion includes authorizing the chancellor to move forward with preparing policies based on the report that was just received or accepted or whatnot. I think given that this is basically the only topic that we've been really talking about related to receiving this report in this length of time, that I think it would behoove all of us to actually say that we accept the report with the exception of those provisions in the report pertaining to the voting of the faculty representative, and save that for further policy discussion. That's what I would recommend in moving forward with this, because it seems like it still will need further discussion, legal opinion, ethical opinions, whatever it might be. So I would recommend that.
So are you making, are you putting on the floor an amendment to this motion?
Yeah, I'll form that as an amendment because I'm sure Randy had that all down.
Sure. So the amendment would be to move to accept the recommendation or the report. Hold on, let me pull it up. Move to accept the recommendations of the Faculty Shared Governance Commission, except for item 3A2 and 4.2, and authorize the Office of the Chancellor to take all necessary steps to operationalize the Permanent Faculty Council and return to the Board of Governors with policy for consideration. That's the friendly amendment.
Okay, do we, Andy, do we need
yeah, I'm gonna actually look to Mr. Smith as well. Sam, so you'll need to, the maker of the motion, that was you, Madam Chair. So then the motion, was that do you deem that a friendly amendment?
Is it a friendly amendment or is it a material amendment? I'm not sure about that. If it's a material amendment, then we would have to
need a second, right, Sam?
We would need a second discussion and approval on that.
So that would need a second, and then we'd have to vote on the amendment.
Right.
And then go back to the floor. So that would need a second.
So that needs a second. Is there a second to Senator Martin's amendment?
Brad Roy, I will second that.
Okay.
Madam Chair, now it's discussion on the amendment to the motion.
Right.
And we vote on the amendment.
Okay, so so basically I'll repeat it. The board hereby accepts the recommendations of the Faculty Shared Governance Commission with the exception of items 3A2 and 4.2, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, you put it up. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Is there any discussion on the amendment?
Yeah, Madam Chair, Don Hauser.
Mm-hmm.
I have concern about the amendment only because it strikes in whole 3A2 and 3B4. 3A2, the first sentence is elected faculty liaison to the Board of Governors and determine term of office. It strikes that entirely. 3B4, it talks about how the council interacts with the Office of Chancellor, et cetera. It strikes that entirely. And so, or I'm sorry, 4.2. It strikes the role of the faculty liaison to the Board of Governors in its entirety. So because of that, I think either the maker of the amendment should clarify the intent of the motion. I get what he's doing, but the motion itself strikes entirely those two sections. Now, not on the amendment, but in broader terms, I would suspect that the board policy will come through the Governance and Leadership Committee before the full board. I know Senator Martin's a part of that committee, and we can take up exactly all these concerns in developing board policy on the role of the faculty liaison to the Board of Governors. We have time to do that in committee before it comes to the full board. And I understand his point that, this says that the Office of Chancellor has to use the recommendations in developing the policy. We as the Board of Governors shape policy, and we have time to talk about this in committee and reach the right balance in what we're doing. And so I have concerns with the motion that it strikes entirely those two sections, and want to say that we do have time to do it right and make a board policy that does the right things for this board moving into the future on the role of the faculty liaison. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Don. I just want to say that I agree with you 100%. I think that we have addressed the concerns through the language of the main motion. It is not obligating to anything, yet it leaves on the table that at least we're going to be discussing these items. With the amendment, we're striking out, even to my mind, the possibility of discussing those. And I'm not in favor of that. I think we need to talk them through because there are differences of opinion, and that's what we do as a board. So I will not be supporting the amendment. And I would ask if anybody else wants to discuss or speak to the amendment. With all due respect, Senator.
We have Representative Roy, then Senator Martin, then Alex.
Okay. Representative Roy?
Thank you. Well, I just wondered if the senator would be willing to add that first sentence back in on 3A2, elect a faculty liaison to the Board of Governors and determine term of office, but then take out the sentence, about, seeking to make it a full voting member. And then on 4.2, take out about the first 12 words until such time that the faculty representative to the Board of Governors is statutorily created. Take that part out, but then leave the part in there that says the role of the faculty liaison to the board, blah, blah, blah. Leave that part in there. Just kind of modify that proposed amendment a little bit.
Okay, Senator Martin, I believe you wanted to speak anyway. So if you want to,
yeah, I'm just
whatever you want to say, please.
Yeah, I'm just going to point back to when I spoke up about making the amendment. I know Randy was coming up with the language. I don't think I ever made a motion to strike out that. I believe my words that I brought up were to accept it. And obviously with the chancellor moving forward in developing the policy, with the exception of those two sections, which I believe my words were used for full further policy discussion by the board, which I believe would then fit into what Dan was talking about. It will go through that process to have further discussion on that before any policy is made or authorizes the chancellor to implement. So I just wanted to clarify that. I don't believe I ever used the word striking of that section, but those sections to have further policy discussion by the board. And in my viewpoint, just like in a Senate committee meeting, if we needed to strike language of any kind of recommendation to authorize the chancellor to go ahead moving forward, that would be the time to do it. So I don't want to say that I don't disagree with where Governor Hauser was going with that, because actually I think that it's right in with what I said, but I have no intention of using the word strike of those entire sections. So I just wanted to clarify.
All right, thank you. Appreciate that clarification. And Randy, it might, if we can put it up again so that we can see how it reads.
See if we got that.
And Alex, did you want to speak?
I was going to suggest if we could put that back up at the end, if we say except for that, couldn't we have to bring forward a policy for board consideration as well as further policy consideration of 382 and 42 at the end of that?
So let's
the chancellor would develop a policy based on everything except for 382 and 42.
Yeah, so you would
also
take out,
consider policy for
so take out except for parts of 3 and then put it at the end, so that the policy.
So it'd be like at the end it would be except for parts 382 and 42, which the board shall consider further at the next meeting.
Yeah. Okay.
So Senator Martin, listening to your clarification of your amendment, does this capture the essence that the board hereby accepts the recommendations of the Faculty Shared Governance Commission, that should be up there, except for parts of 3A.2 and 4.2 regarding, quote, seeking statutory changes to allow for faculty representative to be a full voting member, end quote, and authorizes the Office of the Chancellor to take all necessary steps to operationalize the Permanent Faculty Council and to bring forward a policy for board consideration.
It still misses the piece of further consideration of 382 and 42.
Yeah.
And
I think that it has to be added at the bottom.
This is the ugliest motion in the world, but we're getting there.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Yes.
I'm not a parliamentarian, but I do believe the appropriate thing would be for this board, if there's a consensus on this discussion based on the amendment, that the amendment be presented for the vote, and that if it's voted down, so that this proposal as restated, the intent of Senator Martin's framework, only because the motion on the amendment has already been made, then this proposed amendment be remade on the initial motion that was made.
I'm not sure I really understood that.
Yeah, I could withdraw my original amendment.
Okay, fine.
There we go.
Exactly.
Thank you. I got it now.
Much more straightforward. Thank you, Senator.
Okay.
So now there are no
the original and
for
start
you.
over.
Yeah.
Got it.
So Senator Martin, when Dr. Goen is finished with that, if you can see it or he can read it to you, would you like to make that your motion to amend?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, let's wait and give Randy a chance to try to capture it.
Okay. How does it? It's long, but I think it captures it. That the board hereby accepts the recommendations of the Faculty Shared Governance Commission, except for parts of 3A.2 and 4.2 regarding statutory changes to allow faculty representatives to be a full voting member until it can be considered through the policy development process, and authorizes the Office of the Chancellor to take all necessary steps to operationalize the Permanent Faculty Council and bring forward a policy for board consideration.
Okay, so that gets in the concept that
it's not, the idea is not dead.
It's not
just
right.
needs to be further discussed in the policy development process.
Yes, I make that motion.
Thank you, Senator.
Okay.
I'm Brad. I'll second.
Okay. And discussion on the amendment now as it reads.
Yes, Chairwoman.
Tim Briggs has his hand raised.
Yes, thank you.
So I guess I have a question. So if this amendment were to pass, the strategy of Governor Hauser to develop a policy and work with the Chancellor to address all necessary steps that work in what Governor Mazur's concerns were, this could create a full voting member of a faculty member, to be voted on in the next meeting. So that's how I read this. We're not going to ask the legislature to codify it, but we are on the path to allowing a full voting member from faculty. Is that correct?
That's how I would read it.
Madam Chair, I do not believe the board has the authority to add members to its own board. That would require active legislature.
Right. No, I understand that. I'm looking at this from the point of view of that it allows the board to further consider, this issue and whether or not it would advocate for that with the legislature. Is that what you meant, Representative Briggs?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is just trying to, halt the original motion that you made to take the step necessary to add a faculty member, through statute with our support. And I believe I'll look at this again, but I'm going to oppose this amendment.
Alex's hand up.
I would just point out that the Governance and Leadership Committee never discussed the policy beforehand.
Say again.
The Governance and Leadership Committee of the board didn't discuss the proposed recommendations beforehand, and I think this is a good opportunity for us to do that as a committee between now and our next board meeting.
Yeah, it might be good to take this offline.
Well, the policy deliberation would have to be done in an open session.
And Madam Chair, the one part of this that's probably most critical right now is that the interim faculty council and the Office of the Chancellor is able to use the time between now and the next board meeting to start putting into place the charter and the operationalization of the actual faculty council. We still have a half a semester left in this year, and we'd hate to lose that time between now and the February board meeting to at least work on the operationalization aspects of the permanent faculty council, notwithstanding the policy questions that would come forward.
Right. That's what my concern is. I don't want to table this whole thing. I just feel like we've come this far. This goes along with everything else that we're doing. There are pieces that we're not in agreement on, but there is a piece that we are in agreement on. And tabling the whole thing will just, to me, lose a lot of precious time and momentum.
Yeah, I think just to add to that point, if I can, it's really a question that I think Stephen raised about what other mechanisms we have for at the system level for faculty shared governance, and we have excellent mechanisms available to discuss issues of contractual discuss contractual issues, and obviously we can and we do participate monthly in statewide meet and discuss meetings where we can talk about a range of things, but because of the construct, and I'm not being critical, it's an excellent venue, the focus is naturally on the contractual, and as a consequence, and this is something I think for me at least, which was so important about this commission's initiative, is the importance of establishing a body which can help us think through some of the system issues, and the ones we're facing are they're pretty interesting. They have all sorts of things to do with budget and finance, but as importantly, and maybe more importantly, really with the way we think about academic programming, student supports, et cetera. And there is really no body to do that. And so, we do that very well within the context of the SLG, and I'm very, glad we set that structure up. It's actually working really well. Super proud of the members for their level of engagement. It takes them away from their day jobs, but it has helped us to move forward. And I think the longer we delay in having some kind of mechanism that enables that broader discussion of issues, which are not through a contractual lens, but really talking about the strategic developmental trajectory of our university enterprise at all levels. I think we're not going to struggle. We'll still make progress, but we won't make progress maybe in the way that we had hoped. So if we can find a way to continue to move forward the establishment of the council, the development of its bylaws, while having some broader consideration of this issue, which obviously is going to require some greater discussion, but which is, to your point, Cindy, is very localized, right? It is a specific issue about, whether or not the board would advocate for a statutory change required in the General Assembly in order to make a full voting member of the board, a faculty member, a full member of the board. It seems to me prudent to tip over the apple cart if it's possible to, create a track for that broader discussion around that single, very focused issue where obviously we have more work to do. I think that would help us.
Good. Okay. And I think Randy's captured that in terms of what he has there as an option to the full action. Is there anybody else who wants to speak to the amendment? The amendment is he's calling it proposed. Is there anyone else who wants to speak to that before we vote on it?
I'm just interested actually in hearing what Sam has to say. I was just going to point out that I think we still have to vote on the amendment.
I'm sorry, Sam, I didn't realize you had your hand up. You do, now I'm looking. Okay, Sam?
Yeah. I'm not even sure exactly what the amendment says at this point. I know Randy keeps up and typing things and it's hard to follow and all, but look, the reason we're at this crossroads is that fundamentally what was presented to the board was a framework by the commission to suggest how the chancellor's office might create a permanent faculty council. That's point one that was presented. And then some policy things that we shouldn't necessarily combine in the same boat. So I mean, that's not a criticism, it's just an observation that that's what's making these waters so muddy is we're considering two different things at the same time. Creating an entity that would be an advisory board, an advisory component to the Board of Governors, at the same time of accepting one of the recommendations of a non-existent advisory board. And I think we have to separate these things out in some way because we're in essence setting a precedent as to how you're going to react, how the Board of Governors is going to react to future recommendations of a advisory board that hasn't even fully been established yet. We've got to separate this out somehow into two separate questions before the Board of Governors. Do you want to have a faculty council permanently created by the Board of Governors and the Chancellor, or do you want to debate, policies that we don't even control, that totally falls in the legislative arena? And I think when we get into that whole issue, it just is it's a quagmire that we need to be very cautious about wading into, even though we're already into it up to our hips.
So Sam, originally that's what I was saying. Why don't we bifurcate and only vote on the piece that has to do, with the organizational structure and the process. I think that's what you're suggesting. I think it's important to show respect for the commission and somehow at least acknowledge, the full report of the commission. I don't think it's necessary to have an action item on the whole thing as you're suggesting. And so, you know, that is another direction to go.
That is my point, though, that we are willing to accept what the commission has suggested in terms of creating a more, permanent or established mechanism. But before we do that, why are we accepting a specific recommendation?
We're receiving it. We're acknowledging it. That's all we're doing.
Yes,
I get your point, but I get your point.
I mean, what we're fighting, not fighting, but what we're debating about right now is how is actually what the chancellor's office would be instructed to do, is to figure out how this process would work. So this council exists and they suggest we do X, Y, and Z. How does the Board of Governors then take, filter, and discuss that XYZ recommendation? That's what we're wading into that right now, and we got the cart way in front of the horse here.
Mm-hmm.
So how you can back out to accept their work, which I agree with, that it's I'm more than willing to accept their work. I'm not willing to actually support an action beyond that, and that's where that's the quagmire we're in.
All right. Look, I mean, I think I was trying to say that at the beginning. We should just bifurcate, the organizational piece and vote on that, and continue to work on the other, which obviously needs a lot of conversation and a lot of stakeholder input. So, Andy, I'm going to have to go back to you. Where do we stand?
You had an amendment that was made after. Well, have an amendment. Representative Roy seconded, and the debate is on the amendment now.
So we can vote on this amendment if there's no further discussion, and then we could consider another amendment, which pulls out for the board to approve the parts of the language that deal with the organizational structure as a recommendation. Am I right about that?
So yeah, we have to dispose of the amendment that is on the floor now up for debate.
Okay, and then we can,
Then depending on that, so I can't answer the second question until we know what happens to the amendment.
And Madam Chair, Tom Mueller has his hand raised.
Okay, Tom?
Yeah, I'm going to vote against this amendment, and my suggestion is, I think consistent with where Sam was coming from, is that we are accepting the recommendation from the Faculty Shared Governance Commission to establish the Permanent Faculty Council, and basically it's the words at the very end of this one that would be what we'd be voting on.
Yeah, that's what I'm suggesting too, that I think is also what Sam is suggesting. So is there any further discussion on this amendment? Okay, I think I'm going to call for a roll call vote, Charissa.
Sure. And this is on the amendment, correct?
This is
reads, Madam Chair, if you'd like, I can read it again.
Yes, would you please read the amendment again? Thank you.
That the board hereby accepts the recommendations of the Faculty Shared Governance Commission, except for parts of 3.8.2 and 4.2 regarding statutory changes to allow the faculty representative to be a full voting member until it can be considered through the policy development process, and authorizes the Office of the Chancellor to take all necessary steps to operationalize the Permanent Faculty Council and bring forward a policy for board consideration.
Okay, go ahead, Charissa.
All right, Representative Tim Briggs.
No.
Governor Bronson, not present. Governor Dunlop.
No.
Governor Feefalt.
Yes.
Governor Hauser.
No.
Senator Martin.
Yes.
Vice Chair Mazer.
I abstain.
No.
Abstentions and no vote.
Our bylaws do not allow abstentions.
Governor Moskowitz. Governor Mueller.
No.
Secretary Ortega. Representative Roy.
Yes.
Senator Schwank. Chair Shapira,
No.
Vice Chair Smith,
Yes.
Secretary Sneed,
No.
Governor Washington,
No.
Governor Weaver, Governor Yeomans,
No.
motion does not pass.
Okay, we're back to the motion. I want to reiterate that I voted no on the amendment because I think there's a cleaner way to get to the same place. So, Andy, I need your help again. It would be an amendment to the motion to propose to bifurcate the piece of the motion dealing
Yes,
with
so-
organizational structure. How would we phrase that?
So, Madam Chair, if we may, Randy, can you go back to the original motion to remind everyone what was on the table?
Yes, and the original motion, yes, hold on.
You did save it, right, Randy?
Yeah, I've been saving everything. So that was original, and then we tried to clean it up.
I believe it was made though with the either accepts or receives instead of approves.
Yes.
Okay.
And then the
And so-
original is in the you mean the
That's the
original?
motion right now that's before us.
Right, that's,
Right there on the screen. That's our motion that's on the floor right now.
thank you. So, Madam Chair, I think what you're asking for an amendment to that motion for consideration. Is that correct?
Yes. So the amendment would be, are there the particular pieces that are numbered that we can pull out? Like it would, like 3.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry. That's not the motion that's before us right now. Madam Chair, that was not your motion.
Okay.
This was the
I
original
thought
amendment.
so. I mean, I thought,
Yeah.
okay.
Thank you.
That's why I was
motion
getting
just-
confused. Thank you.
Yeah, your motion just is almost identical to page 48, except for changes approves.
And I believe Mr. Hauser also, she added consideration at the next board meeting, present a policy for consideration at the next board meeting.
Right.
All right. So we could offer an amendment that says we accept and then, authorize the chancellor to operationalize, let's say, section 2, 3A, 3B, and 3C. Is that right? Or did I not? Am I missing something?
So I found your original motion, Madam Chair, so we can build off of this.
Okay. I'm looking to build an amendment that only focuses on accepting, authorizing the chancellor to operationalize the organizational and process parts of this and to consider the rest for further policy discussion. Is there a way you can?
I think you'd want to take out 382 for further considerations, what you're getting at.
Yeah, I'm doing this on the fly here, so thank you for.
And maybe a piece of 4.2.
Well, Madam Chair, if I may, if you
Yeah.
If you strictly limit your motion to the board hereby receives the recommendations, receives, and authorizes the chancellor to take necessary steps to operationalize the permanent faculty council.
Yeah, that's true. Maybe that's it. Maybe
Anything that's not related to the permanent
maybe
council.
Yeah.
And
It looks
bring
like
back
that covers it.
further policy for consideration.
Right.
So, Madam Chair, you were the maker of the original motion, so someone else would have to make the amendment. And Randy, just for completeness, that first motion after faculty council, you will need to insert and present a policy for consideration at the next board meeting. And that was the original motion that was made. And so, Madam Chair, the question for you would be whether or not there's anyone of your colleagues on the board willing to make an amendment as Randy has below.
I'm willing to make an amendment.
I would try to do it.
I would
But
make an amendment.
I'd like to see that, I would make this amendment, but I would change a little bit and say that we would operationalize the permanent faculty council and direct the governance and leadership committee to develop a policy on the faculty liaison to the board of governors.
Agreed. Strongly agreed.
I would ask that no one second the motion until Mr. Hauser has a chance to read what is typed.
Okay.
It's not really regarding the faculty liaison. I mean, it's regarding the transformation of that position, but
Why be so specific on that point?
yeah, I agree. That's not exactly right anyway.
Preordains almost things and ties the hands. Why not leave it where you create the permanent faculty council?
I agree.
Because the report then is accepted, the ideas are all there, we're obligated to consider them in just kind of on a moral level, if not just not a a legal level, but it allows the chancellor's office to operationalize a faculty council.
I think I disagree that we talk about the faculty council if they're being operationalized, and then we would discuss the faculty liaison position. I would second the motion as is.
Mr. Hauser, is that your amendment as proposed?
Well, I think we can after faculty council. We could say faculty council and develops board policy for this effort. I think it's important to acknowledge that we're going to come back in February with a board policy on this to approve what's happening in the meantime with the faculty council and our liaison to the board. So we have the board hereby receives the recommendations. We authorize the chancellor's office to take necessary steps to develop the faculty council, and will develop board policy to encompass this effort. wordsmithing aside. And it doesn't have to, we don't have to say the Governance and Leadership Committee. We can strike that because it'll be a board effort.
I would, yeah, so you could cut out direct and to and develop a complete poly.
There we go. Yep.
Yeah.
Mr. Hauser, is that your amendment?
That would be my amendment. Thank you, Andy, and so moved.
So we need a second of that, Madam Chair. Thank you.
I'll second it. Second.
Okay, is there a discussion on the amendment?
No hands raised.
No hands raised. Okay, well, I'll say that I'm comfortable with this as it's stated. I think it gets to the concerns. It doesn't satisfy everybody 100%, which probably means, you know, that it's fairly good. I think probably, Sharisa, we should take a roll call vote, please.
Yes, of course.
Thanks.
Representative Tim Briggs,
Yes.
Governor Bronson, Governor Dunlop,
Yeah.
Governor Feefeld,
No.
Governor Hauser,
Yes.
Senator Martin, Senator Martin, Governor Mazer,
Yes.
Governor Moskowitz, Governor Mueller,
Yes.
Secretary Ortega, Representative Roy,
Yes.
Senator Schwank, Chair Shapira,
Yes.
Governor Smith,
Yes.
Secretary Sneed,
Yes.
Governor Washington,
Yes.
Governor Weaver, Governor Yeomans.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you very much. All right, Andy,
Order.
advise me, do we have to vote again with this as now as the main motion?
Yes, now this is the main motion before the board is as amended.
As amended, okay.
Point of order, Madam Chair.
Yes.
I could not get my mute button undone for some reason, but I was being noted as a yes on that amendment.
Thank
All right,
you
thank
very
you.
much, Senator. Appreciate that. I'm gonna call for the ayes and nays as a board, and we'll see if we have to go into a roll call. But all in favor, please say aye.
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 Are there any?
Aye.
Thank you. Are there any opposed? Okay, the motion carries. And we're gonna give you a break before we finish. Let me just say that I think we've once again demonstrated an ability to have a really serious, extremely civil and content-driven discussion and arrive at something that we can all work with. And it's so important in this area, especially. So thank you all. This is a terrific board, and I'm proud of all of us. Randy, how long a break can I give?
I would do a 10-minute.
10 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay, so we will reconvene at 11:41 a.m. with a 10-minute break. Thank you all.
right, board members, if you guys just reactivate your video so we know you're back.
Randy, how we're doing?
We are good. We're ready to go when you are, Madam Chair.
Oh, terrific. Okay. Well, thank you all again very much. I hope you took advantage of your break. We are now going to move on our agenda to item 11B, which is about the preliminary strategy for diversity, equity, and inclusion. So we are going to hear from Dr. Denise Pearson, our Vice Chancellor for DEI, regarding her thoughts on strategy to advance diversity, equity, and inclusion in the system. Before she begins, I want to thank you, Denise, up front for everything that the board is about to see and the excellent session you facilitated for the Board of Governors during our recent virtual retreat. You've only been here a little over 2 months, and already you are making a very important impact. So with that, let me turn it over to you to take us through this next item.
Hey, thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, governors, Chancellor Greenstein, presidents, and guests. And thank you, Madam Chair, for giving me this time to share my preliminary strategy for a state systems Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, as noted on page 55 in your board packet. The presentation that I'm about to give builds off of earlier conversations we've had asserting the economic, moral, and social imperatives for elevating diversity, equity, and inclusion as a state system, including being more intentional about closing opportunity and achievement gaps for historically disadvantaged and excluded groups. Next slide. So what you see here is my purpose statement, and it represents our why, which then will in turn drive our how. And fundamentally, the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion exists to partner with university and system leaders to develop strategies that improve student outcomes and create inclusive environments for all members of the PASHE community, and that includes faculty, staff, as well as students. Next slide, please. Many of you have heard me say in the past that you cannot decouple diversity, equity, and inclusion. Diversity alone cannot thrive or be sustained in the absence of equity and inclusivity. And simply stated, diversity refers to the differences among individuals such as race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, religion, etc. Equity, however, refers to fair, but not necessarily equal, treatment regardless of one's starting point in life. And inclusion refers to those actions that foster feelings of being welcomed, respected, and valued. And I believe that accepting the interconnectedness of these concepts is fundamental to our success as a state system. Next slide, please. Since joining PASHE 2.5 months ago, I've consulted with a wide range of stakeholders as illustrated on this slide. Conversations with students have been of particular significance and are ongoing. Monthly meetings with university chief diversity officers have also been strategically valuable, and it is increasingly evident that we have so much to learn from each other. Just think about Westchester and Millersville's recent national award for Higher Education Excellence in Diversity, also known as the HEED Award. That's not an easy distinction to get, and I want to extend congratulations to Presidents Fiorentino and Wuba and their teams for earning this coveted award. Next slide, please. So with wide and deep stakeholder engagement, I was informed it led to the development of these guiding principles and values for the State System Office of DEI. The principles and values affirm and remind us that 1, diverse identities and perspectives are essential parts of university life and should be considered when making all decisions. Students are the core of our work, and we must be intentional about creating environments that recognize differences and provide appropriate and equitable systems that foster positive outcomes. DEI strategies must include outcomes-based goals and be followed by actions that are measured against these goals. And finally, as has been repeated throughout these past 2 days, collaboration is essential, and we must therefore leverage our strengths to co-create an impactful state system that values and embraces diversity, equity, and inclusion. This is a strategic focus that I believe is supported throughout the system based on conversations with students, faculty, staff, administration, and the community, including members of the legislature. Next slide, please. Guided by shared principles and values, we were led to the emergence of foundational strategies that will permeate across strategic planning focus areas, which I will discuss in a moment. These foundational pillars include a focus on students as co-creators of our work, being holistic in our approach and committing again to outcomes-based strategies. Also foundational is the role of professional development to build capacity and foster sustainability of our efforts. This development includes all levels of the system, including the Board of Governors that recently, as Chairwoman Shapiro said, engaged in a dialogue around a book called So You Want to Talk About Race during the recent mini retreat that was held virtually. Finally, we must commit to systemic accountability using board-approved metrics, the state system accountability and comprehensive planning framework, and transparency in our reporting. This is the foundation of diversity, equity, and inclusion work. Next slide, please. So, you know, DEI work is, from where I sit, so strategically important to system redesign and sustainability. And it's easy to want to do everything for everyone right now. And in time, I think we will come close. However, there are topics that have been suggested as initial focus areas. One being equitable student outcomes, and this includes retention, graduation, time to degree completion, etc. Another area is campus inclusivity, the sense of feeling safe, the sense of feeling as though you belong, and then opportunities to participate on equitable platforms. The last one, system and university diversity, diversity in our faculty, diversity in our staff, our students, our administration, diversity in our curriculum. Students have said to me on multiple occasions, they want to see more diversity in the minds, the thinkers that are presented before them in the curriculum. So these are 3 areas that we're going to start in. They may expand and evolve over time as we engage in more structured strategic planning process. That's going to commence in the next few weeks. The ideas will also become more refined as I continue to consult with faculty, students, university leadership, and others. But this is where we're starting, and I think this is a full plate. And I look forward to working with the board and the rest of the PASHE community to move the needle in all of these areas and more. Next slide, please. So I'm just pointing briefly, I'm pointing you to the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion's webpage, which can be found on the PASHE website. This site will be a primary vehicle for communication, including a mechanism for providing input. I hope that you will take the time, if you haven't already, to visit the page and go back from time to time to stay abreast of what's happening throughout the state system in the DEI world and beyond. Next slide, Randy. Thanks. So I mentioned data transparency earlier, and the DEI dashboard was created in that spirit. The DEI dashboard is located on the DEI webpage, and it represents another example of the promise of systemness and collaboration. So I feel compelled to just pause here and give a special thanks to Dr. Kate Akers and her team in the Office of Advanced Analytics, and to the Chief Diversity Officers, Dr. Tracy Ray Robinson at Westchester, Dr. Terrence Mitchell at Edinburgh, and Dr. John Burnett at California for taking time to work with Dr. Akers and me on this important initiative. And this is just the first phase, and they have committed to continue to work with us to make it a useful and a powerful tool to inform our decision-making and to achieve our diversity, equity, and inclusion goals. Next slide, please. So when you visit the dashboard, you will see, first of all, how interactive it is as you search for data on student enrollment and performance, as well as student, faculty, and staff diversity. You can search at the system level, you can search at the university level, and you can disaggregate the data by race and gender. It's no surprise that the data suggests the need to continue the state system's focus on policies that achieve equitable student outcomes, including those that intentionally focus on race. There is literature that contend various proxies that we use for race to address a lack of diversity in our student enrollments, such as income level, first generation college students, etc., do not truly go far enough and have not closed gaps as we may have hoped. However, given the new executive order on this topic, we are evaluating its impact on our universities and the system as federal contractors and grantees. Therefore, we may revisit this proposition at a later time if appropriate. Next slide, please. So this last slide before I open it up for questions addresses the DEI advisory board that's currently being formed to provide advice and support to my office, including guidance on the development and implementation of a 5-year state system plan for diversity, equity, and inclusion. The advisory board will include representation from different stakeholder groups, including faculty, students, and staff, to make sure all voices and perspectives are considered. I am sincerely optimistic about the future, and I look forward to doing the hard work on behalf of all students who choose passion universities to achieve their academic goals. I think we have time for questions if there are any.
Terrific. Thank you, Denise. I think you know, one thing I'm especially excited about and impressed by the ability to get it done is the dashboard. So I encourage everybody to really take a look at that. That's putting, you know, some real action to our words. Are there questions or comments before we continue for Denise?
You guys are tired after that last.
Yeah. Easy compared to that one. I don't see any hands raised, but obviously if anybody would like to.
The chancellor has his hand raised.
Oh, yes, so he does. Okay.
And thank you. I had input from both Representative Briggs and Representative Roy. So now I know how to raise my hand and to put it down. I thought it would be great, Denise. First of all, it's been great having Denise on our team, not only because of the work that she's done, which is evident here, but also because she participates, you know, as you'd expect, in all of our leadership conversations, and is, you know, holding us accountable. I think helping to hold ourselves accountable for thinking always about the impacts our activities, our communications, our everything we do have in terms of creating a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive environment. So I appreciate that genuinely. I thought, and I have inside information, so I apologize, but Denise, I think it'd be great if you could just give a quick thumbnail sketch of some of the sort of immediate opportunities that you see and are pursuing, recognizing that they're not fully baked and they're not fully vetted, but just to, I know in your head there's like a small number of things which just seem to be ready to act on, aside from the dashboard, which obviously we'll continue to develop, and maybe just spend a few minutes giving us a flavor of the work.
Sure. So if we start with opportunities to collaborate with faculty around curriculum audits, if you will, I think there's a great opportunity to work with the members of the Social Justice Committee. I think her last name was Dr. Bernstein, who talked yesterday about, really wanting to see us make some significant changes and holding ourselves accountable. That's one area where we can hold ourselves accountable. And that's not new. It wouldn't be something new. There are systems across the country that are doing curriculum audits to see how diverse their courses are in the materials that they present to students and how the material is presented and how they create inclusive environments. So that's one area. There's an opportunity, I believe, to leverage the work of the Frederick Douglass Institutes, and it connects directly with this whole notion of being more diverse in your curriculum offerings and how you, and curricular diverse practices and pedagogy. So how you teach, not just what you teach. There are opportunities to, and this is very, very new, but there's been a lot of requests to focus on the issue of climate and community policing or campus policing. So I'm currently in conversations with several community groups to see how we can collaborate with our chiefs of police to, despite this executive order that we have to pay attention to, but what can we do to work with them so that they are equal members of the student experience, not just called upon to put out fires. And I'm trying to be very careful. My brother's a retired police officer, and I really do respect the work that they do, but I also understand the challenges and some of the tensions that exist between law enforcement and there's no way to dress it up, communities of color. So those are some of the immediate things that I'll be working on. I have a couple of, again, I don't want to go into too many details, a couple of funders who have reached out to me wanting to know, if they can partner with us on any of those initiatives, but they're particularly interested in seeing how can students see themselves reflected to a larger degree in the classroom, outside of the classroom. Are students participating in high impact practices like faculty student research, when you disaggregate the data by, race and gender. And then the DEI dashboard, there's so much more that we can do with that. And I have a nice working group, and they will be working with Kate and me to really make that into something that will be useful to you all. But there is so much going on, and I may have missed something. So Dan, was there something? Because Dan and I talk every Friday, and he probably gets tired of all of these things that I'm throwing out. Did I miss something that?
No, I mean, I think that what's been so interesting to me is the extent to which you've tapped into just a well of energy at our universities and in every quarter. And I don't know if the president wanted to chime in on that, but it's really, I think your presence here is just really acted as the work's been going on at the universities for a long time. But I think your presence has acted to kind of focus and channel it, which is coalesce around certain topics, which has been fantastic.
Dan, I just want to follow up on that. yes, the work has been going on way before, me arriving here. And to that extent, I hope that you guys take time, not just to go on to the DEI website, go on to the individual university websites to see what they're doing, but know that you can go to the DEI website and it links to the Chief Diversity Officer on every PASHE campus, and you can see some of the great work that's going on. And let me mention again, that HEAT award is not an easy award to get. So kudos to Millersville and Westchester. And we meet once a month as a Council of Chief Diversity Officers, and we're going to be picking that HEAT award criteria apart as a group to see what did it take to get there and what can we do as a system to support one another so that we're all HEAT worthy.
And I'd like to say something if I can, since you would. I just would like to thank Denise for her leadership. She really has hit the ground running. And for us, the timing was just great because we were just standing up our university's first Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion ourselves. So our director reports directly to me. The timing of having Denise in place and he and I speak on a regular basis. And I'm so pleased that he's engaged with you and his colleagues around the system to learn best practices. And it's really helped him a lot and helped us achieve the goals that the office was set up for. So Denise, we thank you for that.
My absolute pleasure.
Yeah, could I also,
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Please go ahead, will you?
Yeah, I echo what Rob said. I do think this is a great opportunity. We have a lot of challenges relative to diversity, equity, and inclusion. The thing I do not want to see, is in the end, it's lip service. I know what Denise is doing is not lip service. I want to thank the board and the chancellor for recognizing an important challenge in our system. On my campus, a diversity officer also reports to me. We are doing a lot of interesting things, and Denise, worked with Terrence as well, who also partners with Slippery Rock with Dr. Barry. So I want to add my voice to support what Denise does and what the system does to improve our diversity within the system.
Thank you, Guiyu. I think just given in the interest of time, if there's, maybe one other president who wants to weigh in, and then we're still on this agenda, so there'll be more. But I'm just interested in keeping the agenda moving. Does any other president want to weigh in at this point?
Madam Chair, this is Ken Long from ESU. I just do want to make a couple
Please.
of comments.
Please.
I think the work that Denise is doing is a heavy lift. Even with the achievements of some of our schools, as a system, I think we have a long way to go, and it's going to require a lot of effort from the board to get us there. There's policies built into a number of things, and Denise and I kind of going back and forth on a few of them. I mean, including collective bargaining. So if we're going down this road, it's going to be a heavy lift, and I think everyone's going to have a seat at the table.
Thanks. I really appreciate your saying that, because it's a perfect segue into now what I'm about to do. And if there are any other presidents who want to talk, there's going to be another opportunity here. But like I said, it's the perfect segue. And thank you, Denise, and everybody for engaging in this work and in this dialogue right now. And I think what both you and President Long has said is absolutely right, that the board has the role and the responsibility in setting the tone and leading the way for that. And so toward that end, I am going to exercise my authority as chair of the board to establish the Commission on Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion in system level governance, which will immediately begin developing a framework for the board's ongoing role in fostering DEI at the system level. So as you can see from the slide, there we go. The commission will have very specific tasks and deliverables, which I believe are critical to its success, and it will, of course, report back to the board. And these include developing a statement from the board affirming the role of diversity, equity, and inclusion as it relates to system design and overall sustainability. And as we know, it's not just a moral and ethical issue, it's an economic issue as well. The commission will be charged with developing a rubric for and conducting analysis of existing board policies through a DEI lens, which, you know, I think will be very informative. I obviously don't know what the commission will come up with on that, but that is a way to not only ensure that everything, you know, we have set up as policy is taking this into perspective, but also gives us a way moving forward when we discuss and create policy. The commission will recommend a plan for integrating DEI metrics into the state systems reporting landscape. So this goes back to the dashboard, and we will really charge this commission with thinking about these metrics. You know, some of them will be able to easily get from disaggregating enrollment, retention, and graduation data. You know, other metrics aren't going to be as straightforward. But to me, there's no point in doing this work if you can't measure what you've done and not only see what your success is, but where you need to do more work. The commission is going to identify potential resources to advance the system's forthcoming DEI strategic plan. Denise, you already indicated that there's some interest out there. You know, this system is really being looked at from the outside with what we're doing with redesign. And this is another piece of it. Both the shared governance and the DEI are very important pieces, and helping not only us, but the outside world to see that we are looking at the new system going forward very holistically and understanding the relationship of all these components. So the commission is also going to recommend how diversity, equity, and inclusion should informed and be infused within the board's governance structure. And by that, what I mean is, do we establish a new standing committee on DEI, or do we figure out other ways within our existing standing committee structure to ensure that part of the charge of each committee is to consider their work through a DEI lens? And I don't have the answer to that. You know, that's another thing that's going to be discussed and debated, and I'm sure will be when the recommendations are brought as well. And the commission will provide guidance for and feedback to the DEI advisory group that Denise talked about to develop the system level DEI strategic plan. So there's a difference in these roles. The advisory committee is really concerned about the campuses. It's campus-based. This commission is about the board and system governance with as it relates to infusing diversity, equity, and inclusion. You know, starting with us as the leadership. There will be points where I'm not sure if it's overlap so much as it will be iterative kinds of conversations, but these groups will inform and work with each other. So I've asked for an aggressive timeline for this work, and we'll seek to have the commission report back with progress toward these deliverables, which are stated here within the charge, first in February as a check, and then in April. Any commission is only as good as its leadership. We saw that certainly with Dawn and the way the Faculty Shared Governance Commission moved forward. And I am truly delighted to tell you that we have asked, and she has accepted Jen Yeomans to chair this commission. I'll be working with her in the days to come to flesh out the rest of the commission membership. But I think we can be assured that with Jan in charge, it's going to be focused, it's going to be pragmatic, it's going to be holistic, and she's going to bring to bear all of her experience in the private sector in getting this work done. So Jan, I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but I would offer the floor to you to say a few words, please.
I won't say too many words, but let me first say that Denise, your being here couldn't have happened at a better time. It is the best thing right at this moment for this system. And I'm sure many others are almost as excited as I am about this initiative and the opportunity to work with you on this. And Chancellor Greenstein, I don't know what you had to do to persuade her to come and undertake this, but whatever you did, thank you. It was worth it. It's a good investment. So having said that, with your expertise, Denise, and with my determination and I think probably sometimes being a little bit too direct, but that's okay. We're going to marshal the energy of lots of other people, their skills, their experience, and we're gonna do whatever we can as a commission to fulfill all the objectives that our chair has set out for us. So really look forward to that, and hopefully we'll get a lot of momentum. I know you have a great head start. So thanks so much, and can't wait to get started.
That's great. Thank you, Jan, so much. And Denise, thank you as well. Are there any questions or comments? This is, of course, at the very nascent stage. So aside from what you've already seen as what the charge will be to the commission, and the fact that we don't yet know who else will sit on the commission, so please don't ask me that, I'd welcome any other brief comments or questions.
Or suggestions.
Or suggestions, yeah.
There are no hands raised right now.
No hands, okay. All right, good. Well, we will have a lot to talk about by the February meeting. So thanks again. I'm really excited about this. And I'm finding that this is a really good way to, sort of get things done, this working through commissions. So thanks all to everyone again. Okay, then I'm going to move on to the next agenda item, I think the last agenda item, which is new business. And we have one item under new business. So as we know, our very own Jerry Jones, president of CalU, will retire at the end of January, excuse me. Jerry, you're amazing. You deserve this retirement, although I'm very sorry to see you go, and I know everybody shares those sentiments. But as such, we have to do our job and appoint an interim president following Jerry's departure. And the vice president for administration and finance, Bob Thorne at CalU, has been identified as the person to fulfill this position. Now, let me just say that Bob will come into this appointment under circumstances that no other interim president has experienced here. This is, quite a time to be taking this on. Specifically for Cal, at a time where we're exploring the potential integration of Cal with two other universities, as we discussed yesterday. So it's an exciting and challenging time for the system and for the university and for the system. So let me first thank Jerry for setting the stage for success. This is an important thing, that a president does. And we're grateful that you took it so seriously and had it, so much under control. You really got this. And let me also thank Bob for agreeing to carrying the torch while we work through the integrations process. So I'm going to put a motion on the table and then we can have any discussion. I would like to rather ask board members to put forth a motion that the board approves the appointment of Robert Thorne as interim president of California University of Pennsylvania, effective January 29th, 2021 at 5 p.m. and authorizes the chairwoman of the Board of Governors and the chancellor to execute the necessary documents. Would somebody move that motion, please?
So move.
And a second?
Second.
Second.
All right, is there any discussion?
No hands raised.
No hands raised. Okay, I don't see any either. All right, with that, I'm going to call for a vote. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Are there any opposed? Thank you. Any opposed? Terrific. The motion carries. Congratulations, Bob. We very much look forward to working with you. And Jerry, we will definitely find the opportunity to appropriately honor you and your service at our meeting in February. So before adjourning, let me just report out that the board met in executive session from 1:55 p.m. to discuss personnel and legal matters yesterday. And with that, is there any other business to come before the board? Can tell everybody's ready for lunch. However, as a reminder to the board, we do have a short executive session starting in a few minutes. So I would ask voting board members only to please stay on Zoom with everyone else logging off. And thank you very much. This has been a really great meeting. We're adjourned except for executive session.